Hey, what's up? It's John from Coding Addict, and welcome to Practical Git and GitHub from Basics to Pro Workflows course. Whether you're just getting started or you have used Git before, but never really understood what is happening under the hood, this course is for you. We'll start with the absolute basics, initializing a repo, making commits, tracking changes, using Git command line, and VS Code GUI. From there, we'll dive into real-world workflows, working with branches, merging, rebasing, stashing, and even recovering lost work. You'll learn how to resolve conflicts, squash commits, cherry-pick changes, and collaborate on GitHub using pull requests and remote branches, just like you would in a professional development team. The main goal of this course is to avoid repeating the same old Git commands you've probably seen in every beginner tutorial, and to skip the flags and options that you'll rarely or never use. Instead, we'll focus on the workflows, strategies, and commands that are actually used in production, on real projects, in real teams, every single day. This way, you're just not learning Git. You're learning how to use Git effectively in the environments that matter most. And the best part, we're going to practice everything, not just watch. Every major topic has a guided challenge or a project to help you apply what you have learned. If you ever get stuck, refer to the Readme included in the course. It's packed with commands, notes, and step-by-step instructions for every section. If this sounds interesting, I'll see you in the course. Before we begin, I just want to mention that this is the first part of my Git and GitHub course. So if you enjoy the content and want to access the complete course, the full version is available on Coding Addict.io and also on Udemy. Just search for my courses and you'll be able to enroll in this one and many others. All right, and I guess let's start with the most important question. What is Git? Essentially, Git is a version control system, and that just means it helps you track changes to your code over time. Ever made a change to your project that broke everything and wished you can go back? Well, that's exactly what Git is for. Git lets you create snapshots of your project called commits. You can move backwards and forwards through those commits, see who made changes, when they were made, and even what exactly changed, line by line. But Git isn't just for backups. It's actually a core tool for collaboration. When you're working on a team, everyone uses Git to work on different features at the same time safely, without stepping on each other's code. So if you think of your code as a story, Git is a history book. Every commit you make is a page in that story, and you can always flip back, rewrite, or rearrange it when needed. In this course, we're going to use Git like it's used in real projects, to manage work, to fix mistakes, to handle collaboration, and to understand exactly what is going on under the hood. In order to follow along, you'll need three things. First, a text editor, preferably VS Code, since I'll be showing you a bunch of tips and tricks on how to work with Git and GitHub directly from VS Code. That said, if you're using different editor, for example, IntelliJ, you can still follow along just fine, since the Git commands are exactly the same, and most modern editors have great built-in support for Git and GitHub. So all of the things that I'm going to show you with VS Code, you'll be able to find the matching options within your own setup easily. Second, you'll need a Readme file. This file contains all of the commands, challenges, external links, and extra info you'll need throughout the course. It is located in the course's GitHub repo. So in my GitHub profile, you'll find a repo called Git GitHub course. So this is the main course repo. And in order to get here, just follow this URL. And once you navigate over here, you have two options. You can either get a hold of the project by downloading it, or you can also use the clone option. And lastly, you'll need Git installed on your computer. And the good news is that on many systems, Git comes pre-installed. So you may not even have to do anything extra. To check if Git is already installed, open your terminal and run git-v. So in my case, I'm doing this in the Visual Studio Code in the integrated terminal, but of course, we can do it in a regular terminal as well. We want to go with git, then -nv, git-v. If you get back the version, you don't need to do anything. You can move on to the next video. If you get something along the lines that, hey, the command doesn't exist, you'll need to go to your browser, search for Git. Most likely, this is going to be the first link that pops up. Bravely navigate over here, and then you want to look for your operating system. Most likely, it's going to right away detect it, and then follow these steps. So in my case, they suggest using brew to install it on the Mac. And then once you're done with the install, and again, you run the command git-v. If you see the version, you can move on to the next video. If not, please troubleshoot, since obviously you won't be able to follow along without Git being installed on your computer. Once you have Git installed on your machine, there is one important step you need to complete before you can start using Git: configuring your username and email. Simply because Git uses this information to identify who made each commit in your repository. Don't worry, you don't need to use your real email address unless you're working in an enterprise environment, which we will cover later in the course when we'll discuss config in more detail. For now, you can use any email you would like, but you will need to provide some kind of value. For the username, of course, you can definitely go with shake and bake, and the same goes for the email. You can come up with whatever email you would like, but you will need to provide some kind of value. So this configuration step is mandatory. You won't be able to make any commits. And of course, as a result, you won't be able to continue with the course until you have set up this Git identity. So think of it this way. It's like introducing yourself to Git before you start working together. And the commands are following. We have git config -- global, then user.name, and then we provide some kind of value. Yes, there's also a local one, but like I mentioned before, we will discuss this config in more detail a little bit later. For now, I just really want to start using Git. You have a few options. You can copy and paste these commands and set them up in your terminal. But since I feel like a real hacker every time I use the terminal, I'll actually type them from the scratch. I'm going to open up my terminal. I'm going to zoom in. It doesn't matter where you're located. You're setting this up globally anyway. And we want to go with git config, then -- global, then user.name. And in my case, I'm going to go with coding Addict. Okay, we have the first one, and then the second one is going to be the email. And I think I'm going to use one of my many course emails, which is learncode@mail.com. Okay, awesome. It's not awesome. Let me exit this one over here. And let me see whether I actually added the correct one. And in order to do that, we need to go with git config -- global, and then -- list. So this is going to list what values you have over there. And as you can see, actually my last one wasn't correct. So let me repeat one more time. I'm going to go over here, and I'm not looking for 2 quotation marks. I actually want to set up 1. And now let's try it out again, the same command to check all the values. And now everything is correct. I have username, and I also have the email. And if you have the same result, we can move on to the next task. Before we create our first Git project, let's learn about the basic commands and how Git works. I like to think of Git as a time machine for my code. So as we're working on our project with Git, we'll be taking the snapshots of our code. And in the Git world, they're called commits. Basically, this is going to be the state of the project at that specific time. And once we have this set up, we can do a bunch of cool things with these commits. We can branch off the commit. We can go back to that specific commit. So essentially set our project back to this specific snapshot that we took early on. We can maybe just use the files, aka cherry pick from that commit and use in another branch, and a bunch of other cool things, which we're going to cover during the course. The first thing always when we start working with Git is going to be telling Git, hey, you need to watch this folder. And we do this with the command of git init. Without this step, Git won't know about our project at all. It's basically putting a special sticker on your folder that says, hey, Git, please watch this. And we also have Git status, which shows the current state of your working directory and staging area. So Git status shows what's changed, what's modified, and also what's untracked. And like I mentioned before, as we work on the project, we take snapshots of our code using commits. Again, in the Git world, they are called commits, but I like to think of them as snapshots, essentially a photo of our code at a certain time. Now, when we make that commit, Git remembers who took the photo, aka who's the author, also when it was taken, a special code called commit ID or commit hash, and what changes were made. So you'll be able to see what work you actually did. In order to make such commit, we have two commands. We have git add, and we also have git commit. Now, for the add, we have multiple options. We can add one file, or we can add all of the files. And I like to think of git add as deciding, well, which files are going to be added to that particular snapshot. Keep in mind, we technically don't need to add all of them. We can maybe work on 3 files and then decide that we will only commit 2. That's definitely an option, although quite common is to add all files, but it's still important to remember that with git add, we can decide what is going to be added to the staging area. So essentially what files we will add into a commit into our snapshot. And then once we have decided, in order to actually make the commit, in order to actually take the snapshot, we will need to go with git commit -m, and then we'll provide the commit message where we describe what changes we made. And once we have our commits, if we want to see our commit history, essentially what changes we have been making to our project over time, we have git log command, which is going to show us our commit history with all of the details. And if we want a quicker view, if we just want to see the commit ID, basically a commit hash and a message, then we add this -1 line. This should do it for the basic concepts, but before I let you go, I would also like to show you the main concept, how Git keeps track of our files. And this is a 3-step process. First, we have untracked state. So this is when you create a new file, Git sees it, but it's not paying attention to it yet. Essentially, it sees the changes you made, but it's not tracking it. So if you're going to delete that file, you won't be able to get the contents back, since Git is not tracking it yet. So every time we create the file and start adding some contents to it, it's going to be untracked. Next, we have the stage state. This happens after you use git add. So once we create the file, once we add the changes, and we run git add with one of the options, now Git is watching our file. Now, it's not tracking it yet, but it's like choosing which items to put in our photo. They are selected, but we haven't snapped the photo yet. So we have selected the files that we want Git to keep track of, but we haven't made the commit yet. And finally, we have the track state. And this happens after you commit your file. Now Git will watch for any changes you make to this file. So remember, untracked, Git sees it, but ignores it if we delete the file. Staged, Git is watching, but not tracking it yet. And finally, we have the tracked one, where Git is officially keeping track of the file. So now if we remove that file, we have a few options how we can get the file and the contents back. This should do it for general commands and overview. And with this in place, let's start coding. Okay, and now let's use the commands that we discussed in the previous video. Let's start by creating a new project. As always, the location and the name is totally up to you. I'm not going to be particularly original, and I'm going to go to a desktop, and I'm going to create a new folder, and let's call this Git or first Git project. Why not? We're looking for our text editor, in my case, Visual Studio Code. And yes, I have massively zoomed in. I'll show you in a second why. So let me make this one smaller, drag and drop. So now I have my project over here. And the reason why I've zoomed in so much is simply because, to tell you honestly, during the course, we won't be concerned too much with the contents of the file. We'll mostly be concerned what we have over here on the left side, since during the course, I'll also show you how to use the Visual Code's graphical interface in order to work with Git, and also we'll be concerned with the terminal. So this is where we're going to be writing the commands. And therefore, I will zoom in and zoom out just so you can clearly see what commands I'm writing over here. As I'm looking at it, maybe it wasn't the best approach essentially to have such a long name, because I want the command over here, but it is what it is. Let me just close the side window for now, and I think we're going to be good. Remember, in order to tell Git to track our project, we need to run git init. If you don't do that, then let's say if you're going to add some kind of command here, git add, it's going to say, hey, this is not a Git repository. Therefore, the first step is always to initialize Git repository by either running the command, or later we'll take a look at the graphical interface approach as well. As a side note, if you're not familiar with the terminal, essentially it's the same thing that we have over here, but this one is the integrated one, which essentially means that we're right away located in our project as well. Now, I'm sure that most of you, if not all of you, already know that, but I just wanted to mention it. So now let's actually tell Git to track this project. And the way we do that, we go with git init. So now officially Git is tracking our progress. And the first thing that I want to do is create the new file. If you take a look at the README, I did leave a command for the terminal warriors, how we can essentially create the file right away using the terminal. But I think in my case, I'm just going to do it here using GUI. And let's come up with some kind of file. Let's call this file 01, or you know what? Let's go with main. And this is going to make sense a little bit later. For now, let's go with main 01 and text or markdown. This is totally up to you. And once we have the file, we can add some contents. For example, we can go with the same text. I'm just going to go with main 01 txt. We save it, and now we want to add this file to the staging area. So now I want to start working on my first commit. In order to do that, we go with git add, and we have multiple options. We can write the file explicitly. So I can go with main01 txt. So I want to add this file to the staging area. We can go with git-a, which is going to add multiple files, because obviously we can create multiple files in the single commit. That's definitely an option. For now, we're just starting with one file. And also we have this git add dot. There is a difference between -a and dot, and we will actually cover this later on in the course. For now, just think of it this way. We can add one specific file. So for example, if I have main02.txt, and if I only want to add the 01, then I'll write a specific file. Or if I want all of them, which we'll do in a second, then we just go with git add and we add the dot. So this is going to add all of the files to the staging area. So at the moment where we at, well, we have untracked over here, and we want to go with git add to add to the staging area. Once we run git commit, this is going to be added to our commit. Let's go here with main01, since probably this is going to be the only time during the course when we do that, since quite often you add all of the files, if not all of the times. So we go with git add main.txt. Now this is added. And one command that I actually, for some reason, forgot to mention is the git status. So if you run git status, this is essentially going to show you the current status of your repo. So at the moment, we have no commits yet, but Git sees that we have made some changes. Like I mentioned before, if I'm going to remove this file altogether right now, Git won't keep track of it. So this content is lost forever. Not to be dramatic, but something to keep in mind. So good. Now we can see that we have staged the main01.txt. In order to make our commit, we want to go with git commit, then -m, and then we need to come up with the commit message. As far as the commit message, you can write here whatever you would like. Just keep in mind that if, let's say, you're storing this project on GitHub, all of those commit messages are publicly available. So everyone can go there and essentially see those commit messages. So be mindful of what you actually write over here. There are some common approaches, and we will discuss them a little bit later. For now, let's just go with the commit message of create main01.txt, or just main01. Create main-01. And okay, let's add txt. Why not? Let's go over here and check it out. Once we do that, we actually made our first commit. So now if I go back to git status, you'll see over here that we have nothing to commit. The working tree is clean. And you also see over here this branch main. Again, something we're going to discuss in a lot more detail later on in the course. For now, we can just see that, okay, we made our commit. We're good to go. Now, remember, in order to see our commits, we want to go with git log and check it out. We have the commit hash ID. We have something called head. We have something called main, a branch we just discussed. Then we have the author, the email. Also, we have the date, and we also have the commit message. So we have create main0.txt. So now I would encourage you to repeat these steps with the main02.txt. So pause the video, try to repeat the steps, try to experiment with the git add all, or maybe type the file name. This is totally up to you. And once you're ready to compare the results, resume with the video. Okay, good. Hopefully you were able to create the file, add it to the staging area, and make the commit. In my case, I'm going to make it a bit more interesting. I'm just going to show you how we can pick one file if we have multiple. So let's say I'm going to add another file. And yes, during the course, I will use this approach where I'm going to incorporate the branch name. Again, something we haven't discussed. And then I'm just going to go with 1, 2, 3, 4. Since that way we'll be able to nicely see the path that we are taking. So let's go over here with main0txt. Same deal. We're going to go with main0txt. And just to make it interesting, let's create another file. I'm going to call this 03txt. I'm going to add the same text over here. And the reason why we have that file option for git add, I can go here with git add and then main0txt. So once I do that, and once we run git status over here, you'll notice that we have untracked files, which is going to be 03txt. And then this one is added to the staging area. So this one will be committed once we run git. And just to showcase that, I'm going to go with git commit message. Let's say create main0txt. And nope, that's not what I wanted to do. Let's add over here the quotation mark. And if we go right now with git log, and we can definitely get the full log with all of the info, but just to showcase that, we also have this option, git log -- one line. And now we can see that this is going to be the shorter hash as well as the commit message. As a side note, in order to retrieve the commit, you'll need 7 characters. That's why we see over here 7 characters. So remember, when we ran the git log, we got the full info where we had the full commit hash. But in order to retrieve a specific hash, you only need the first 7 characters. Now we can see that in our repo, which essentially stands for Git project, so repository stands for Git project, we have 2 commits. So this one was to create the first main, and then this one was to create the second one. But our 03 is technically still untracked, correct? And in order to showcase how we can commit multiple files, now I'm going to create main04txt. Same deal. Just going to add over here text. This. And now let's add multiple files to our staging area. In order to do that, we're going to go with git add. Remember, we have this option, so -a. And yes, there's a difference between them. Or in this case, we can nicely use also git add and then dot. So this is going to take all of our files, which, by the way, we can see over here. So we have git status. So now we can see that we have 2 untracked files before we add them to the staging area. Let me clear this, git add. Let's add all of these files. Now let's see git status. Now both of them have been added to the staging area. So now both of them are over here. And then once we make the commit, they will actually be tracked. So we'll make the snapshot, and Git will be tracking any changes we make to the file. So now let's go here and say git commit create main03 and main04. Okay, and this is totally up to you, but I'm gonna go with one line just to have cleaner terminal. And now we have 3 commit messages. So now we have 3 snapshots of our project. So now our project has 3 commits. Each of them has this unique commit hash. Each of them has the commit message. And now we just need to learn all of the powerful things that we can do in the Git repository. And just so you don't think that we can only create files when we work with Git, let's modify one of the files. Let's delete one of the files. And let's also maybe create the folder with the file just to make it interesting. We'll start over here. I'm going to remove the main04. Yep, we delete this over here. Then we want to modify the 03. Let's call this, or you know what, let's just remove text over here. And then lastly, we want to create a new folder. In my case, I'm going to call this colors. And then inside of the colors, I'm going to create red txt. Let me zoom back in. And yeah, let's just write red dot txt. Now let me close the sidebar. Let me clear everything. Let's write git status. And now what do we see over here? Well, we can see that one was modified, the 03. One was deleted, the main 04. And we also have this untracked folder, the colors one. And in this case, once I make that commit, all of these changes will be applied. Now, the good news is, again, since we're using Git, if we ever change our mind, there are ways how we can get back this info. So just because I deleted this main 04 txt now, doesn't mean that it's lost forever, like it would be with the untracked files. In this case, Git is tracking it. It is tracking its content, so we can always be sure that we'll be able to get it back. Okay, now let me go with git add, and now I'm going to add all of them. And just to make things interesting, I'm going to go with this command just to showcase that this works. Now let's go with git status, check it out. We have new file modified and deleted. And then let's go with git commit message. And since this video is about making things interesting, why don't we call this shake and bake? Like I said, you can write here whatever you want, probably not in the enterprise setting for sure. But when you're working on your projects, you can make this interesting. Okay, shake and bake, good to go. And now let's go with git log. Maybe first let's go with the long one, just because I want to show you how we can navigate git log. You see, once you have multiple commits, this is going to produce a longer answer. And at this point, in order to navigate, you go up and down with the arrows. And if you want to exit, you'll need to press Q. So same deal. We still have the long commit hash. We have the author, we have the date, and we also have the commit message. And as we're moving down, we're going back to our first commit. Notice this create main txt. Again, in order to navigate up and down, we go with the arrows. And then if we want to exit this, then we just go with Q. And now we exit this. And how is the one line going to look like? Well, like this. We have shake and bake. That's our last one. This is where our head is for the main branch. Again, terms that we haven't discussed, but I want you to already start remembering them since this is something important. And then, of course, we have the rest of the commit messages as well. And with this in place, I think we're done covering the basic commands. So now I just want to show you how we can do all of that using the Visual Studio Code graphical interface, or GUI for short. Okay, and up next, let's see how we can do all of the commands we just covered with the Visual Studio Code graphical interface, or GUI for short. And before we dive into the actual interface, I just want to quickly talk about why I think using the VS Code GUI is really important. You see, working with the GUI is often faster and more straightforward, making it easier to stay organized and focus on the code itself. Now, don't get me wrong, knowing the commands is great, because at the end of the day, GUI just runs those commands behind the scenes when we click few buttons. So it's definitely worth learning the basics and understanding the main concepts. Therefore, we'll always start with the commands. But in my experience, the GUI can be a huge time saver, especially when working on a real project. It's just faster and easier for many everyday tasks. Plus, when you're dealing with large code bases in a production environment, having a clear visual view of your changes can be a lifesaver. And despite what some YouTube influencers might say, I have found that many senior devs actually prefer using GUI over typing the commands and resolving conflicts in a terminal. It just simplifies the workflow and lets them focus on bigger decisions. That's why in this course, like I just mentioned, I have decided to show you actual production setups and approaches rather than just repeating the same old Git commands. So in the following videos, whenever I need to use a command we have already covered, I'll mostly stick to the GUI for the sake of speed. However, if you prefer typing the commands, that's always an option. Just keep in mind that the production environment is a whole different beast with large amounts of files, folders, and potential conflicts. So I wouldn't dismiss the GUI too quickly. All right, after this long and hopefully not too boring intro, let's recreate the first Git project using the VS Code GUI. Now let's navigate to the desktop. At least that's where I'm gonna go. And I also decided to save all of the folders we're going to create during the course. And maybe at the end of the course, I might add it to the main repo. I don't know that yet, but at least that's the plan. Technically, you don't have to do it, so don't worry about it. Every time we'll work on the new concept or topic, yes, I will create a new folder, but you don't have to save it. In this case, we're going to go with new folder. I'm going to go with 02. Again, this is totally optional. And then let's go with VS Code and GUI or graphical interface. Then let's open up the Visual Studio Code, drag and drop. Okay, we set it up over here. And remember, we just want to create some main 01, 02, 03 files. And we want to make the commits. And then we also maybe can take a look how we can modify, delete, and all that cool stuff. And when it comes to Git, we're looking for this source control tab. That's it. That's all we need. And then once we click, notice we right away have this initialize repository or publish to a GitHub. And essentially, this is the same as running Git init, just like I mentioned. Only in this case, we're doing it by clicking the button. Yep, we have our Git repo in place. Now let's navigate to the folders. Let's create main 01 txt, main 01 txt. Let's save this one. And now we want to navigate back to the tab and check it out. We have right away the changes we made, and we have a few options. First of all, this right away tells us that this file is untracked, which means what? Well, if I remove this file, if I delete it, then it's going to be wiped out forever, since Git is not tracking it yet. And in here, the other options we have is open the file. So this is going to navigate to the file. Also, we have discarding changes. So if the file is tracked, then essentially it's going to just reset it to the previous commit. But since in this case, it's not tracked, like I just said, it's going to delete the file. So if you want, you can definitely test it out. Or another option we have is stage the changes. So this is like running git add. So we just add this file to the staging area like this. And then if we want to remove it, again, something we're going to cover later with the commands, we just press on this minus and then we unstage it again. So here we have the changes. We click on plus and now it's added to the staging area. And as you can see here at the top, we have the place for commit message. What do we want to write over here? Create main 01 txt. And then we have multiple options. We can click over here or we can click here for the commit and check it out. Now I can also right away see my logs. I can see that this is the commit message. And if I hover over, I have more info. And as we're going to be making more commits, we'll nicely see over here our commit history. And not only that, once we start working with the branches, it's also nicely going to show us essentially what path we took. What is our commit history? Since in production, it's very important to kind of see where your branch is, where's the master, and all of that stuff. Okay, let's try it out one more time. Let me show you one more shortcut. So technically, we don't even need to add to the staging area. And I'll do it right away with two files, just so you're more impressed. So in here, we're going to go with 02 txt. Okay, great. Main 02 txt. Yep. Let's add another one. In this case, we're going to go with main 03. 3. For some reason, typing is not my strength. txt, okay, good. And since at this point we have two files, technically, if we want to add them one by one to the staging area, we need to hover over and add them, correct? So now we add both of them to the staging area. However, there's actually a shortcut. Let me move them back to untracked. So remove them from the staging area. And we can actually, if we want to commit all of them, navigate to commit message. And I'm going to write 02 and 03. And we can right away press on commit. So if you know that you'll be committing all of the files, just go to the commit message, provided, click on it, and the VS Code is going to do the rest. So now we nicely have the latest commit show up over here as well. Let me also show you how we can delete, how we can modify, and all of that stuff. I guess let me go with new folder. I believe I set up the colors over here. So red, txt. So this is going to be our change. Then I think I'm just going to remove this file. So we're going to delete that one. Yep. And then let's edit over here. Let's remove that text. We're going to save it. And now we can see the same thing. We have 3 changes in our repo. So we deleted this one. And since Git is tracking it, if I'm going to click on discard, it's actually going to bring back the file. The same goes for that main 0txt. If I'm going to, again, discard the changes, then it's going to bring back to the latest commit, which is this one over here. And we also have this untracked one, which essentially is that new file. Now, what do I want to do? Well, I want to create the commit message where I'm going to say shake and bake. And we're going to go with commit right away. So we're going to commit all of the changes. Hopefully it's clear why in production we are using graphical interface. It's simply faster and just easier to work with Git with the graphical interface. So yes, it's important to know the commands for sure. That's why we always start with the commands. We understand what they're doing. And then we'll also right away cover how to do the same thing with the graphical interface, since most likely in production, you're going to use graphical interface. And with this in place, we can move on to the next topic. And up next, I want to show you how we can navigate around our commit history, simply because I find it super impressive. So think of it this way. We're taking snapshots of our code, of our project, and with the help of Git, we can just navigate back in time where, let's say, we didn't introduce the changes yet, or we didn't create the file, or any of the things we have covered so far. I also need to warn you that technically we haven't covered few things that we're going to see, for example, detached head, and also we haven't covered the branches yet. So if you don't want to, you don't need to follow along. I'll just kind of show you what things we can do with Git. But if you are following along, please make sure that you don't make any commits in that detached head, simply because it's going to be confusing, at least in my opinion. Yes, we will cover these things later, and then of course you'll be able to nicely create the branch and save those changes, and you'll be good to go. Okay, let's navigate back. In my case, I'm going to do this over here in the project we just worked on, but you can definitely do that also in the first one. Now I just want to open up the terminal. We'll start with the commands, and I'll show you by the end of the video how we can do that here in the graphical interface. And we have 3 commits. And let's imagine the scenario. I want to go back to the create 02 and 03. So I don't want this shake and bake. Let's say that was a mistake. The way we do that, first, I'm going to go with git log and one line. And as a side note, yes, pretty much for remainder of the course, most likely I'll run this one simply because it keeps the terminal clean. We can see that we have 3 commits. And now I want to go back to this one. The way we do that, we run the command, which we'll cover later. So for now, not going to discuss what we're doing. we're just going to go to git checkout, and then we grab this commit over here. And you'll see something very interesting. The moment we do that, this turns yellow, which essentially means that we are in detached head. Just a quick intro. When it comes to detached head, it simply means that we're not part of any branch. And if we want to commit and save our changes and keep those changes, essentially, we need to be part of some branch. And by default, we'll always be in the main, or in the older versions, it was master. And yes, you can actually rename your main branch to something else. Again, something we're going to cover. But you need to be part of the branch, whether that's a feature branch you just created, or let's say the main one. But when we navigate back using this approach, we're not part of any branch. So we're kind of in a no man's land. Now, what's interesting though, you'll see this powerful feature where now I don't have the folder. I don't have the changes I introduced. And actually, if you take a look, everything is back like it was in that commit, which is, again, in my opinion, super powerful, that we can just make the commit. Then 20 hours later, we can go back to that specific commit, and the project is going to be exactly like it was doing that specific commit. And also, you'll see that GUI is also going to complain. As you can see, this is technically yellow, so that's not correct. And now, in order to exit this detached head state, we simply want to go with git, and again, we go with checkout, and now we type main over here. So now we're going back to the main project. And yes, later on, we'll see how we can exit this, let's say, particular commit to a separate branch, or we can right away create the separate branch with the specific commit, which will allow us to go back in time. Now, if you want to do the same thing with the GUI, it's pretty much like this. We go over here, we right click, and notice it says right away checkout, and it warns you that, hey, listen, this is going to be detached. We click over here, and yes, what do I know? We navigate back to the project like it was. Now, in order to exit, it's a little bit different. Now we click over here, and we're looking for the main one. So we go back, and now we're back in our main branch with our commit history over here. So that's one approach how we can do it. And there's also one where we can reset the head. In this case, though, I do suggest keeping the logs just so we can nicely navigate back. What am I talking about? Well, let me clear it. Git log one line. So we can reset the pointer that we have. So instead of this one, the shake and bake, I can reset the pointer to the one before. But again, please keep this one because we will reset it back. We're going to go with git reset hard. Yes, we will cover this command, head. And then we just want to go one instance. That's why I go with one. And now I'm still in a main branch. However, notice there are no changes, correct? And now if we run the log one more time, you'll actually only see these two. So technically this one is gone. Now there's ways how we can get this back. In this case, we're keeping the terminal, but there's another way as well. Something we're going to cover later. For now, we just want to go back to this git log. Let's get it. So now we see only two of them. Again, we're just resetting the pointer of our branch. So now our branch has this latest commit, create 02 and 03. We have successfully reset it. But if we want to go back to our previous state where we had 3 commits, now we want to go with git reset hard. And instead of that head one, again, I'm going to use that commit hash. So I'm going to grab it over here. And we're going to navigate back. And now it's going to be to the state where it was before I was resetting it. So hopefully this gives you a clear idea how powerful the Git is. And yes, we will cover the commands I showed you during this video in way greater detail in the upcoming videos. All right, and I think at this point I would like to show you the difference between git add dot and git add -a. And also I'm going to show you a few things that you should never ever do when you're working on the Git project. So please pay a close attention to this this is an example of the things we shouldn't be doing. First, let's navigate back to our desktop. In my case, I'm going to create a big project. And let's imagine the scenario in your production. You have a front end and a back end. Pretty typical setup. I'm going to open up over here. It's totally up to you. I think for the most part, I'll use the GUI. Let's start by initializing the repo. Then we want to create a folder, and I'm going to call this front end. Inside of the front end, let's create index.html. Why not? That's sort of typical, unless you're working on the single page application. Again, this is totally optional. You can create the txt file as well. I'm just going to say front end. And let's create the CSS file as well. Main CSS, body, background red. We're not going to see that in a browser anyway, but let's just make it sort of realistic. Background red. And then we want to go to index. And I already forgot how to do that, but let me try to remember. We needed to set up the link, I believe, the CSS one. So instead of style, I'm going to go here with main CSS. Okay, we nicely point to it. Good, we have our front end in place. So now let's navigate over here. Let's right away commit both of them. So I'll say create front end. Yep, we commit. Okay, good. And now let's create the server folder as well. Let's imagine that somehow, some way, our front end is going to be communicating with the back end, which we're not going to implement as a side note. So we're going to go here with server. Inside of the server, I want to run app. And let's come up with some kind of console log. Server running. Why not? ... Okay, good. And then it's quite typical in the production projects to actually navigate to this particular file. Because let's say you're making some kind of changes there and you need to be specifically there and you want to run some tests, you want to build it locally and stuff like that. So what do? Well, you use your integrated terminal, you go here with server. And my approach, especially for the big projects like this, I just do the drag and drop. Yes, of course, in this case, we can go with CD and type to server, but it's my preference to do it this way, since that's my approach for big projects. And once I'm in a server, let's say I just want to quickly test it out. What do? I go with node app.js. Okay, good. Now, of course, it's going to complain since it's not console. It should be console log. This is what happens when you have custom logs in your production application. You already forget how to write console logs. Let's run one more time. And yep, we have server running. And now what do I want to do? Well, I want to go with git add. I click on that, and if I take a look at the graphical interface, everything is correct over here. I have added the app.js. Okay, let's make some changes. Let's actually remove it from the staged. So let's set it back to untracked, and quickly let's swing over to a front end. Let's say that we want to make some changes there as well. I don't know what changes we could add. Again, it doesn't really matter, but we're going to go with gray, for example, right? So I quickly want to change something in one folder, and I quickly want to change something in the other folder. And technically, if I'm going to go back and git add, what do you think is going to happen? Well, it should add all of the files, correct? But here's the gotcha. It's only going to add all of the files that are in the folder where you're located. So yes, it will add all of the files and the subfolders, but only in the folder or directory, however you want to call it, where you're located. So if we're going to run git add and dot, you'll also see over here in the graphical interface that only app has been added, and these changes were not added to the staging area. Something to be mindful, because in the big projects, you will be navigating around the folders, and if you just automatically go with git add and dot, don't be surprised if you don't see all of your files over there. And at this point, we have a few options. We can either go with git add -a. So this is going to add both of them to the staging area. Or with the help of graphical interface, we can add this one to the staging area, the main CSS, and then we can commit both of them. Or you need to basically remove both of them from the staging one. So make sure the app.js is not in the staging, and then you commit with the shorthand, with the commit one. So as you can see, at the moment, both of them are in stage. So once I type over here, it's definitely going to commit both of them. Or let's say you didn't run git add. So let me remove this one over here. So now this one is still in the changes one. You either can remove this one, so they're both in the same place, or you add it to the staging one. So this is totally up to you. In my case, I'm just going to show you what happens if, let's say, they're not both in staging. Remember, there is a shortcut where I'm going to say create some changes, create changes, and we commit over here and check it out. Now we have our commit in place as well. And while we're still in this folder, I also want to show you what we should never ever do when we're working with the Git. So one thing that you might do initially when you see this uncommitted file from the main CSS is to navigate to the front end and create another Git folder. But we should never create another Git folder inside of the existing Git folder. So please don't do this in a real project, but I'm just going to show you what might be the approach, where I navigate back to the big project and then I go with cd front end, and I see that the main CSS wasn't added to the staging. So I'm like, hey, maybe I need to add a separate Git repository. So I'm going to go here with Git init. And this is never a good idea, because eventually this will lead to huge bugs, since now you're tracking the actual Git project by another Git project. It's never a good idea. And it's also not a good idea to actually navigate to the Git one. As a side note, yes, it exists over here. So if I go with the list files command, notice over here this .git. So this is the hidden folder that actually saves all our work. So also don't do something like this, where you go with cd.git. I'm located over here. We can nicely check out the files and folders. And yes, this is super useful. We can essentially see our project in action. So there might be even a time when you want to come here and check something out, but please don't do this. Don't start another Git repository over here. Again, I'm just showing you things you shouldn't do. So to recap, if we want to commit all of the files in our project, regardless where we're actually located, we go with git add and then -a, or we add it through the graphical interface. So we set them pretty much in the same state, whether it's in the staged or it's still untracked, and then we go with the commit message. And also, we should never, ever, ever add another Git repository inside of the existing one. And up next, let's quickly discuss some general rules and common practices for writing commit messages. While the content of the commit message is totally up to us, I believe you'll find these tips helpful, especially when you're working with a team. First, keep in mind that commit messages are public. So if you publish your project on GitHub, anyone can read them. That's why it's a good idea to write messages that are clear and helpful. And also be mindful of what information you include. So sharing a secret value is probably not something you want to do. Ideally, you want to keep them short and specific, like add, login, validation. And also you want to use imperative mood, such as fix bug instead of fixed bug or fixes bug, because it reads like if applied, this commit will, and then the commit message. So this commit will add login validation. This commit will fix bug. Now, if you want to explain more, you can add a longer description below the summary. Just try to keep each commit focused on one thing. And if your team uses prefixes like feat or fix, just be consistent with them. All right. It looks like we're done with the section. And before we move on to the next topic, I would like to work on a small project that covers everything we just learned. Hopefully, this will make it easier for you to remember the commands when you need to use them in your own project. That said, this video is completely optional, so if you're not interested, feel free to skip it. You'll find the project steps in the README, and if you're up for a challenge, pause the video, complete the project on your own first, and once you're done, come back and compare your results with mine. All right, so now let me show you my solution. First, we want to navigate to desktop, and I'm not going to number this. I'm just going to go with name, my Git project. As always, technically the name is totally up to you. You want to open this up. We want to open up the terminal like this. And if we take a look, we shouldn't see any hidden files. So let's see ls, la, and yep, it doesn't show anything. And also, if we're going to go with git status, it should return the error, since this is not a Git repository yet. Okay, so now let's turn this into a Git repo. Remember, two options. We can either go with git init, or we can do it here in the GUI. We have that one. Then we want to check the status one more time. So let's go here with git status. And now we can see that it is a Git repo. We just have no commits yet. Okay, let's clear that. After that, we have create a file, main.txt, and write some content. Let's do that. We go to the files, say main 01, or no, it actually says just main.txt. Let's write main.txt. We're going to save it. Now we want to check the status one more time. And once we run the command, we can see untracked files, main.txt. And also we can see the same thing in the GUI. Then we want to add to the staging area. So with the command, that would be git add and then dot or the file name. And with the graphical interface, it's going to be over here. So I'm going to add it to the staging area. Then we're going to write commit message. In my case, I'm going to go with create main.txt. We're going to commit this. Then let's clear that. And now we want to see the commit history, but we want to do that in a simplified format. So let's go with git log and then one line. If everything is correct, we're going to see our commit. Now let's modify the main.txt. So say add some more text. We also need to create the notes folder. So let's say here notes. And then inside of the notes, let's do to do txt. And let's add some text. To do txt. We're going to stage all of this. Let's add to the staging area. We will provide the commit message. In my case, I'll say create to do txt and modify main.txt. We're going to commit that, and then we're going to go with git log one line. And if everything is correct, we're going to see both of these commits. Next, let's explore Git branches and why they're super useful. You see, Git branches let you work on different features or fixes without messing up the main code. Imagine you're building a new feature. So this is going to be my main project. I can create the branch for my feature, experiment over here freely, and only merge it back when it's ready, when I know that for sure everything works as expected. And this way, multiple people can work on separate tasks at the same time without interfering with each other's work. And this is exactly how you build code in production. Before you add anything to the main application, to the application that essentially makes the money for the company, you always create the branch. You set up some tests over here. You make sure that everything works as expected. You also merge first the main into the feature, and then you only merge the feature back into the main, something we're going to discuss a little bit later. But the idea is that I create a branch, I make the changes, and then once I'm ready, I can introduce the code to the main application. And again, there's multiple variations for this one, but in the most straightforward scenario, this is how our commit history is going to look like. So we have all of the commits before we made the branch. Then we have the commits that are inside of the branch. As a side note, yes, we can actually squash them as well. So we can just make one. And then this one commit or multiple commits get added to our history. As far as the commands that we're going to use, there's going to be a git branch, which is going to list all of the branches. We can create the branch with git branch and then the branch name. We can switch to the branch with the checkout command, something we used when I showed you how to navigate around Git history. So the checkout command actually allows us to switch between the branches. And in our case, when we were in detached state, we just switched back to the main branch. So by default, we are always going to be on a main branch or a master, again, in the older versions. And also, there's a newer command which pretty much does the same thing, which is switch. And this one allows us, again, switch the branches. We create the branch, then we list the branches, and then we switch to the branch we want to. And also there's a shortcut how we can create the branch and right away switch to it. And that one is checkout-b and then the name. So this one will right away create the branch and switch to it. And the alternative to that one is going to be switch-c. I think we're going to create two branches. One is going to be the long way with the branch and then the checkout, and second one is going to be with the checkout B. I'll show you then how to merge. I'll show you how to remove branches, and then yes, we'll repeat the same thing with the Visual Studio Code's graphical interface. Let me add over here maybe 03. Let me nicely store them here. And now we want to go with new folder 04. And in my case, I'm going to call this branches. Same deal. We open up the Visual Studio Code. Yes. We're going to start by creating two files or one file. This is totally up to you. I just want to make one commit in my main one. So let's go here with 02 txt. Remember, we need to initialize the repo correct. Say create main 01. Let's commit this. Then let's do the same thing with the 02. 02 txt. Main 2 txt. Commit. Yep, we want to commit. Create main 02 txt. And once we have this one in place, now we have two commits. So now let's create that branch. Let's imagine that we want to add some specific feature to the project, but I don't want to do it in the main. So first I want to create my branch, test it out, and only then introduce to the main branch. The way we do that, now we're going to switch to the console since we haven't covered the commands yet. We're going to go with git. And remember, in order to list all of the branches, what is the command? Well, it is git branch, correct? So we run over here and we can see that we only have the main one. And as a side note, yes, by default, this is going to be the setup. You're either going to be working on a main or master, or you can rename it locally for your own projects as well, something we're going to cover later. But you will be on that main branch, and therefore from now on, I'll refer to it as main. Hopefully you understand which branch I'm talking about. In order to create the branch, we go with git branch, and then let's come up with the branch name. It's totally up to you, but in my case, I'm going to go with feature. Now, if I go with git branch, what do I know? I have two of them. So in order to switch, what do we need to do? Git checkout or switch, and then the branch name. Since I'm used to checkout. I'm going to use this one. So we're going to go with git checkout. And of course, I typed the wrong thing. I typed the branch name here as branch. And as you can see, the error message you're going to get is following. The name branch did not match any of the branches. What is the actual branch name? It's feature, correct? So we navigate over here. And since we're starting from the same point, so the main branch and the feature have the same two commits, notice how technically nothing changed. But believe me, as we're going to start working with the branches, this is going to change. So I would encourage you to keep an eye on this one. So at the moment, we are at this state where we had some commits, 1, 2,000, whatever. And then when we created the branch, nothing changed over here. So this is the same. And for now, this one is the same as well. And we can actually see that over here. If we go git log and then one line. So this head essentially is a pointer for the branch. So this is going to point to the latest commit in specific branch. And in this case, we can nicely see that the head, so the pointer for the branch feature and main, point to what? Point to the same commit. Why? Because there were no changes introduced in the main since we created the feature. At the end of the day, they're still pointing to the same commit. And this is super, super important to remember because, again, these things are going to change as we start creating branches, merging, and merge conflicts and all that. So head is always going to point to the last commit of the branch. And you can nicely see that at the moment, they're pointing to the same commit. Now we're going to change that. We have over here the feature branch. There's multiple ways how we can double check that. We can go here with branch. Yep, we're on the feature. Notice. And also we can see it over here. So I'm located in the feature branch. And now I want to create a new folder. Let's call this feature. So I'm adding this feature. And I'm going to stick with my approach where I just go with features 01 txt. Feature 10 txt. Save it over here. And same deal. As far as the commit, we just go with create feature 01 txt. And now we want to do the same thing with feature number 2. I'm going to navigate back to the same folder. Now we're going to go over here, feature 02 txt. Feature 02 txt. Let's commit this. Create feature 02 txt. Let's commit that and we'll notice something interesting. Now the main branch is actually going to point to the same commit, the create main 02, but the feature one is going to point to the feature commit. So if I go with git log and one line, check it out. So now head for the feature branch points to this commit. So this is our latest commit, but it's not the case anymore for the main. So if we're going to switch back to the main, we'll still see this commit over here. And what's really powerful that as we're switching between the branches, we're essentially switching between two different projects. How does that look like? Well, if I'm going to go here with git checkout and then the main, notice how right away these files don't exist over here in this branch. So I can nicely go to the feature, experiment with some stuff, and if I don't want it, I can just delete the branch and I'm good to go. If everything works as expected, then I can introduce the changes to the main. But as I'm working on a feature, main doesn't know about it. So everything is good. If we have working application, we're not messing with the production code, which is obviously super, super useful. And therefore, such approach is used in production. Since I can take the working code, I can introduce my changes, I can test whether everything works as expected, and only if everything works, then I introduce the changes back into the main. And it also allows multiple developers work on the same project. And the way we're going to mimic that is by creating a second branch. Only in this case, I'm going to show you the shortcut. Let me clear everything. We're still working with the commands. And first, let me check whether I'm on main. I mean, I can technically see that, but yep, I'm in main. Then we want to go git checkout or switch C. I'm going to stick with checkout just because that's what I use. And then let's call this bug fix, for example. So this will be a bug fix branch. Okay, we right away created and switched to the branch. And now let's do the same thing. As a side note, yes, I'm purposely introducing only the changes that are not going to trigger the merge conflict, since we're going to cover merge conflicts later on in the course in a greater detail. So for now, we're going to go with this perfect or happy path scenario where everything works just like the tutorial should, correct? So we're going to go here with the bug fix. That's going to be the folder we introduced, then a new file. Let's call this one bug fix 01 and txt. Bug fix 01 txt. And you know what? Let me just copy this one, create bug fix one. Yep. We want to introduce these changes and also create one more file. Bug fix 02 txt. Not this file name. I want to go with txt. Copy and paste, change it over here, select everything, and then navigate back. And we're going to go with create bug fix. Okay, let's commit this. And we'll notice something interesting as we are switching the branches. Again, we're working with sort of totally different projects. Yes, they all start with these two commits, since the main one hasn't changed. But at the end of the day, these are totally different projects. So if we take a look at the Git branch, we have bug fix, we have feature, and as we're switching between these branches, we'll notice that we have some files and folders that don't exist in other branches. And again, this allows us to work separately on the issues, so we're not stepping on each other's toes. And also this allows us to test things without breaking the production code, which is sitting in the main. Okay, and up next, let's see how we can merge branches, which combines changes from one branch into another, allowing you to bring together different lines of development. In other words, let's see how we can introduce our changes from, for example, feature branch back into the main branch. There's two main types of merges. We have the fast forward one, and this one happens when the target branch has no new commits since the source branch diverged. The git simply moves the target branch pointer towards the source branch's latest commit, creating a linear history. And we have a three-way merge, which we're going to see with our bug fix once we merge the feature into the main. And this one occurs when both branches have new commits. In that case, Git creates a new merge commit that combines the changes from both branches, preserving the divergent history. In other words, if you started to work on your feature branch and there are no new commits to the main one, when we do the merging, it's going to be fast forward, simply because we're just going to add the changes we applied in feature to our main one. But when it comes to the bug fix, it's going to be a three-way merge, simply because the main one and the bug fix one have diverged. In other words, if the main branch doesn't have any new commits since we created the feature one, we'll have a fast forward merge. But if there's going to be some extra commits over here, then we'll need to create a merge commit. And this is going to be the case with our bug fix. So let's start working on it. We're going to navigate back. In this case, I want to switch to a feature. Let's try it out. This command, git switch. say feature. So now I'm located in the feature branch, and my approach is going to be following. First, I want to merge the main one into the feature, and I'll go into detail why it's going to be my approach during the course a little bit later, once we know already how to delete the branches, and only then I'm going to merge the feature one back into the main. Now, I right away want to let you know that yes, technically we can merge the feature one directly back into the main, but I will cover why it's not going to be my approach during the course and why I also don't think that you should be doing that. So first I'm going to switch to the feature branch. I'm going to double check, yep, I'm on a feature, and now we want to merge main into the feature first. So first I want to take the main branch and see whether everything works as expected. Yes, in our scenario, there were no changes. So Git actually is going to say, hey, everything is up to date. There's no need to do that. But just so it's a practice for you, we'll actually do it together. So we're going to go here with Git, merge, and now we want to select the branch we want to introduce. And in my case, it's going to be main. Again, in this case, Git says, hey, everything is up to date. What's your problem? Yes, we're still going to do it this way. Git merge main. Okay, good. We're already up to date. And now we want to switch to a main and merge it with the feature. So the way we do that, we go over here with Git, checkout or switch, however you want to do it. Then main. So we switch to main, and now we go with Git merge. And now I want to introduce the changes that I have in the feature to my main branch. So I go Git merge feature. And now I'll see this fast forward again, since branches haven't diverged, since we have this scenario over here. Now we simply just take these commits and we add to the commit history of the main one. Realistically, it's not going to be scenario, and you'll see in a second why. So this was nice and dandy. We had the feature branch. We checked whether we're up to date with the main one. Yes, we were. There were no changes. We're all good to go. And then we introduced our feature one to the main one. So now if I take a look at the main one, what do you know? I have the feature over here. We tested everything works, and now we introduced this particular feature with feature one and feature two to our main branch. And I believe in the next video, I'll show you how we can remove the branch once we're good to go. Okay, awesome. And now let's switch to the bug fix. And let's first discuss whether we'll have the same scenario. So let's go here with Git checkout bug fix. Okay, we switched. Everything is good. But can you answer me this question? Do we still have the scenario? And probably, since I'm asking this question, you already know that the answer is no. You see, now our situation is different. Since we introduced the feature branch into our main branch, there has been some changes since we created the bug fix branch. So when we merge the main one into the bug fix, it's not going to be anymore the fast forward merge. Instead, we'll need to create the merge commit. And we can actually see that if we navigate back. Notice for the bug fix, we have these two first commits, main one and main two. And then we have the bug fix one. However, if we switch, again, check out main. Notice now we have main one, main two, and now we have these two feature ones. So when we'll merge the main one into the bug fix, which is going to be our approach. So that's going to be our first step. Since our branches have diverged, we'll need to create a merge commit. Let's go back to our bug fix one. So the starting point is the same, but since we merge feature branch, we already introduced some changes in the main. Hopefully that is clear. So we go with bug fix, we switch over here, and we want to do the same thing. You know what? Let me just clear everything. We go with Git merge, and now we want to introduce the main. We want to see whether our changes are working well with the main because keep in mind, now we actually do have already some changes in the main. So we go over here, and the moment we type this, if we're running the commands in a terminal, it's going to open up the Vim editor. And here we can actually change this commit message. So essentially, this sets up the commit for us. And if we want to, we can change this commit message. And once we exit and save, it's going to add that commit. Or if we're working with the GUI, then we can do the same thing where we add our commit message and we just click on continue. Since we're working with the terminal commands, first I'll show you this one. And then once I show you how to do the same things with the GUI, we'll most likely just do it over here. In order to change the commit message, which by the way is here at the top, merge branch main into a bug fix, we want to press I. Then we want to navigate over here. And if you want, you can change this. Now, in most cases, I just stick with the default one, but just in case you want to change something, let's add over here testing maybe. And then in order to continue, we want to save the file. And when it comes to Vim, we do this in the following way. So in order to edit something, we needed to press I. So now we're inserting, then we press escape. And now we just want to type :WQ. So go with shift, get the colon, then WQ. And this is going to save the file and we're going to quit. And the moment we do that, now we actually merged main into our bug fix and we created the commit for that. So now we're up to date. We can take a look that in our bug fix, not only we have the bug fix folder, but also we have the feature one. And we can test it out, whether everything works, whether our application behaves as we expect. And now we want to do the same thing like we did with the feature, where we introduce our bug fix one back into the main one. And you can probably already see that the benefit of such approach, where we are introducing the main first into our feature or bug fix or whatever branch, is the fact that this way we're not introducing some bugs, because this way I can test everything here locally in my branch. Once I know everything 100% works, then I'm going to merge it back into the main. But at that point, everything should work, correct? Because at that point, we already added all of the changes that main had. So it should be a smooth sailing. Now let's switch again to a main like this. And then let's go with git merge. And then remember, the branch name is bug fix. So now it's going to be again fast forward, since we already took care of the merge commit when we introduced into our branch. And if we take a look at the git commit history, we'll see all of the changes that we applied in our branches. And as you're looking at the commit history, you're probably noticing something interesting. You see, we have main 1, main 2, then we have the bug fix 1 and bug fix 2. And then since these ones we introduced with the help of merge, now they're actually part of this merge commit. So this is how we merge branches in Git. And once we're done merging our changes back into the main, let's also see how we can delete the branch. For that, we have 2 commands. Of course, I'm discounting the Visual Studio Code GUI, but in the terminal, we have 2 commands. We have git branch -d, and then the branch name, and then we have the capital D. You see, with the small d, Git will prevent this if you haven't merged the branch. Again, not our scenario, but we can definitely create a test branch, not merge it, and you'll see that actually it's the case. But with the capital D, it's not the case. Git is not going to complain if you're trying to delete the unmerged branch. So let's try it out, I think. Why not? Let me right away create the branch. I think I have too many files in here. Let me close it all. We're going to go with git checkout -b and then test. Let me add the test file here. New file test 01 txt. Test 01 txt. Let me make the commit. So create test 01 txt. Let's commit this. Let's switch back to the main and let's run git branch -d and then the test one. And since we haven't merged, Git is going to complain. Now we don't care about it, so we're going to go with git branch -D and then we go with test, and now you'll see that this branch has been nicely deleted. And we can repeat the same thing for both of the branches we just created for the reason that they already merged. So this is totally up to you, but I think the first one I'm just gonna go with git branch D and then feature. And then the second one is going to be git branch D and then bug fix. And if I'm going to run git branch, I'm just going to have the main one. And while we're still on a roll, let me also quickly cover why during the course I'll stick to this approach where I'm going to merge always the main one into the feature, and only then we're going to merge it back. And the reason for that is following. This allows us to resolve our conflicts early and makes the final merge back into the main smoother and helps us prevent surprises or conflict later. And that's why in production, this always is going to be the approach where we create the feature one and we always introduce the main one first here. We test it out whether everything works, and only then we merge it back. And at this point, this should be a smooth sailing. If everything works in our branch and if there haven't been any changes, and as a side note, if there have been changes, then yes, we'll again merge it back into the feature, test it here first, and only then push it back into the main. So this is super important. You don't want to introduce something to the production application that might or might not work. That's not an option. And therefore, yes, during the course, I will always use this approach, even though technically for your own projects, you can skip this. As a side note, you can test it out. You can create the branch, introduce some commit to the main, then add some changes to the branch as well. And then instead of merging main into the feature, well, merge it directly back into the main one. You'll see that you'll be able to do it. That's not a problem. But when it comes to production code with bunch of files, bunch of folders, bunch of conflicts, potentially, that's not the approach that is used. And therefore, I'm not going to use it during the course. While working on the previous project, you may have noticed that the commit history on the main branch was a bit messy. This happens because git merge keeps the complete history of all branches. Adding a merge commit, sometimes also it's called a merge bubble, that captures the moment two branches come together, preserving all of the original commits. In contrast, git rebase, which we're going to cover next, rewrites the commit history to form a straight line by replaying your changes onto the target branch, removing the branch merges. However, be careful, because git rebase creates new commits with different hashes as it rewrites the commit history in the branch you're rebasing, which is why it is highly discouraged to rebase public branches. Most likely something I'm going to mention quite a few times during this course. So if you take a look at the left side, we see the merge example, and you can see over here this merge bubble, because it basically keeps the entire history. And that's why we also see over here the merge commit. And if we do the same thing with the rebase, we'll have this one straight line. Now, how does the rebase works? Well, for starters, we only care about it if our branches have diverged. Essentially, if there is more commits from the time we created the branch. If it's not, then it doesn't matter whether we use the merge or rebase, everything is going to be up to date as far as the Git is concerned. However, if we have some changes in the main branch, represented over here by this commit of M2, again, normally in production environment, this is going to be some other developer adding changes to the main, but we can imagine that during the tutorial, we can simply add some kind of commit in the main. It's definitely an option. And if that's the case, we go with the rebase instead of the merge, and we won't have that merge commit. So what rebase is going to do, it's going to take all of the commits that we have in the main, and it's going to replay the commits that we have in our feature branch, basically the bug fix, the payment, whatever you name the branch, and it's going to replay those commits on top of these ones. Now, as it does that, and this is something I'm going to show you clearly in the upcoming videos, it actually changes the hashes. So if we start here with M1, M2, then it replaces B1 and B2. The result, what you're going to see is following the M1, M2, and then there's going to be a new hash for B1 and the B2. In here, I just set it up as B3 and B4. So when we merge back our bug fix branch, because again, we should never ever rebase the public branch. And that's why I'm not going to definitely do this during the course. So when it comes to production, you'll always merge. And therefore, during this course, we're not going to rebase on a public branch because keep in mind, if it rewrites the history like this from B3 to B4, what do you think is going to happen if we rebase on top of the main one? Well, then it's going to flip essentially all of those commits because it's going to take the main and it's going to rebase on top of this one, correct? So as it does that, it's going to change those commits. And therefore, we should always avoid it. And we're going to go back to the merge. So we'll rebase here, but then when we go back to the main, we will merge it. And as a result, this is going to be our commit history. And once we're done with the examples, I'll talk about when you should choose merge and when you should go with the rebase. So now let's work on the example. In my case, I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this 05 rebase. And my apologies, but I will keep 2 commits in each branch simply because that way we can have the same commit history and we can nicely see the differences. Yes, essentially it's going to look like this. So this will be our merge one and this is going to be our rebase one. But just so we're sure and just so you have it for your reference, I'm going to have those 2 commits. My apologies. Up next, probably I'm going to save some time and we won't make as many commits unless we definitely have to, since that way we can save a little bit of time. But for now, we'll do that. Let's initialize the repository. We're going to create over here main 01txt. Also, I decided not to type any text. So the reason why I was typing text, just in case I need to show you how the modifications work, but I guess I'll just do it when I'll have to. So for now, we don't even need to add text over here. I was just kind of showcasing how we would add the content, and hopefully at this point, it's already clear. We have over here, create main 01txt. Okay, good. We submit. Same deal over here. New file, main txt 02 txt. Let's create main 02 txt. Okay, we commit. Now I'll switch the branch, and I'm eager to show you how to do it with the graphical interface, but for now, let's do it actually with the terminal. Again, we have switch, we have checkout. I'll use checkout since I prefer checkout. And what was the feature branch, correct? Let's go over here. Let's create those commits. So we have over here a new folder. I believe that was my approach feature. I'll actually create both of the files and I'll set up 2 separate commits. So it's going to look like this: feature 1 and feature 2. So technically, if you want to, you can add everything in one commit, but I'll split it up in 2. First, let's add this one over here. This is going to be staged. So create feature 01 txt. Okay, we'll submit this one, and then we'll also add this one to the staging area, and we'll say create feature 02 txt. Okay, we'll submit that. Now we have those commits in the feature. Now let's switch back to main. So git checkout, and we're back in main. And from the main, we also want to create our bug fix one. So git checkout b bug fix branch. We're good over here. Let's see what we've got. Okay, we have 2 main ones. Again, the starting point is the same for both branches. Now we just need to add the folder, I guess. So we have over here bug fix, and then bug fix 1. Bug fix 1 txt. Let's create the commit, create bug fix 01 txt. Let's make the commit, and let's repeat the same over here. We have the bug fix 1. Now we're going to go with 02 txt. And now we're going to commit that. So create bug fix 02 txt. Let's commit this. And again, this is totally up to you, but I'll follow the same steps. So first, we're going to rebase the feature. But since the main is basically the same, since we created the feature one, everything is going to be up to date. And then we'll just merge it back. So now let's go over here, back to the feature one. And if we run git rebase main, so now we want to rebase on top of the main one. So we want to take the main commits and we want to replay our commits on top of the main. What you'll notice that we have current branch feature is up to date. Why? Well, because we don't have this scenario. We don't have any commits in the main, which again is not going to be scenario in production, most likely. If you have a team of developers working on things, there's constantly someone adding something to the main with the help of the branch, of course. Okay, good. And now we just want to switch back to main. So git checkout main, and then git merge feature. We merge it back and we're good to go. It was still fast forward merge. So we can continue. Let me clear everything. And now let's navigate to the bug fix one. So we're going to go here with git checkout bug fix. Then we want to go with git log 1 line. And notice the hashes over here. We have the hash for the last commit, and we also have the hash for the first commit. So in my case, I'm going to take the screenshot just so you can see how after the rebase we have new hashes. So let me select this. Again, we're just interested in these two since the hashes won't change in the main commits. So we're only talking about the commits in the bug fix one. And now we want to go with git rebase. And again, we're selecting the branch which we want to rebase on top of. And in our case, it's going to be a main. And again, you should never ever do the opposite. You should not rebase the main one on top of the feature one. So we're going to go here with main. Okay. If we go again with git log, you'll see the commit history, --1 line. Notice now we have the bug fix one on top. Then we have the feature one, and then we have the main one. So now our job is pretty much the same. We want to switch to main and then git merge, and we want to pull in the bug fix like this. And now if we take a look at the commit history, notice everything is in one straight line. So we have main, then feature, and then we have bug fix and bug fix. Again, we do need to be careful with the rebase, but it does return this nice commit history, which is in straight line. Let me again just make a copy of this one, and we can switch back to the bug fix one, but I can tell you right away, but the same result is going to be if we log this actually in the main. What am I talking about? Well, I want to go with one line, and now I want to compare these two commit hashes. So let me pull in the screenshot, and then let's compare the result. And once we pull in the rebase screenshot, we can clearly see that these were the hashes before we rebased, and these are the hashes that are created after the rebase, and we can see that they don't match. So during the rebase, we do replay the commits, and we create those new hashes. Now, $1 million question. When do we use merge, and when do we use rebase? As always, it actually depends on the situation. When you work on your personal project, it's totally up to you. And mostly what I see is developers using the merge approach, especially since there is an option to squash those commits, something we're going to cover later. I didn't want to do that yet since I wanted to clearly showcase the difference between the merge and rebase. And when it comes to rebase, you simply might have the company policy where you need to use a rebase instead, since they want to keep their commit history clean. I've had that situation for multiple companies where there's a specific Git policy and it doesn't matter on my preferences. I need to use a rebase, and that's why it's important to know rebase, because simply company has a policy that requires using rebase. And now let's practice merge and rebase, as well as probably deleting the branches as well with the VS Code graphical interface. And in this case, I'm going to create one file per branch. I'll also create 3 branches because the first one is going to mimic the changes that we have in the main one. And then the second and the third, I'm going to showcase the merge as well as the rebase. Since there's no point to show, for example, merge if the main branch hasn't diverged. Let's start by creating the folder. In my case, I think I'm going to go with 06 branches VS Code, like this. Then we're going to open up our favorite text editor. Yep, that's what we want to do. Let's start over here by creating a new file, main01txt. This is happening in the main. So now we just want to initialize the repository and also right away create main01txt. Okay, let's commit that. And if we want to create the branch in VS Code, we simply go back to this one, which we covered a little bit when we discussed the detached head. So we'll navigate over here, and nicely we see create new branch, and we have create new branch from. And it also right away shows which branches we have locally, as well as eventually we'll take a look at the remote ones. As a side note, you can also find this with Command-Shift-B, and then you type create branch, and you'll get there eventually. But it's actually my preference, this one. So we click here, we say create new branch. Let's call this feature. We're located right now in a feature branch, correct? So now let's create that file. Or you know what? Let's do the same way. We're going to have feature. We're just going to create one file inside of it. New file, feature 01txt. And let's commit this one. So create feature 01txt. Let's commit this. Be careful. Don't check out from the feature into the bug fix. We again want to go back to the main one first. since again, we want to mimic the production environment. As a side note, yes, you actually do check out from, let's say, other developers' branches, but we're not going to discuss that yet. For now, we're just looking at the straightforward scenarios. So once we click here, notice again, we have two options, and I want to switch back to main. And then once I'm in the main, I want to go with create new branch. As a side note, we can technically skip this if we're still in a feature, and we can go with create new branch from. But again, let's just stick with this approach. We're back in main, and now we want to create new branch, and I'm going to call this bug fix. Same deal. We create new folder, call this bug fix. Inside of it, we create bug fix file 01.txt. We commit this, create bug fix 01.txt. We commit this one in here. Then we're going to switch back to main and we create the third one. Let's call this payment. Why not? So we're going to go here and say create new branch, and we're going to call this payment. Lastly, one more folder, payment. Then inside of the payment, we want to go with payment 01.txt. And let's make that commit here as well. It's important. Let's do it here. Create payment 01.txt. Okay. We're going to commit this. And if we take a look, we have 3 branches, correct? So once I click over here, we have the payment, we have the bug fix, we have the feature, and we have the main. And if we go and log the commit history in each of them, we'll see that the starting point is pretty much the same. So since we created these branches, the main branch hasn't changed. We still have this create main 01.txt. Now let's change that. In the payment, I'm going to pull in the main one, since it's pretty much the same. Nothing is going to happen. And then we're going to go back to main, and we'll merge the payment into the main. And at that point, it's going to become interesting. So I'm still in a payment, and if I want to merge the branch, I click over here on these 3 dots. We keep on moving, and we have over here branch, and notice we have merge and rebase. So, and as I note, we can also create the branch here. I just find this option faster. So we go with merge, and then we need to pick, well, which branch we want to merge into the payment one. And we're looking for the main one, correct? Since everything was up to date, it was smooth sailing. So now we want to go back to the main. Again, 3 dots. Then we're looking for the branch merge, and let's pick which one we want to merge. And in this case, I'm going to go with the payment one. As a side note, when we're using the GUI, it will actually right away commit that merge message as well. What am I talking about? Well, you'll see that in a second. Remember when we worked previously with the merges, the second merge, we actually needed to set up that commit message. In here, it does that automatically. So if I'm going to go right now to the feature, this is where I want to show you how we would merge it. I'm going to go with the branch, then merge. And now I want to merge the main one into the feature one, correct? So we go over here and notice how it automatically created that merge commit. So we didn't have to do that manually. And now let's go back to main again. And now we're going to merge the feature one into the main. Again, we go with those 3 dots. We go with merge. And we're looking for the feature one, correct? So this is what we want to merge into the main one. Okay. So now we have this feature one as well as the merge commit. And now lastly, let's take a look at the rebase. So we're going to go again to the bug fix one. Look for 3 dots, then branch. Now we want to rebase one, and we want to rebase the main one here. We rebase, and now we'll switch back to the main one, and we're going to merge bug fix into main one. lots of merging and rebasing. So let's switch back to main. And now we want to, again, do the branch merge. Please don't rebase. And we want to merge the bug fix one into the main one. And if we take a look at the history, we can see the linear history for the bug fix one since we use the rebase. And then in here, we have that merge bubble. So this is how we can create branches, merge branches, and rebase branches with the Visual Studio Code graphical interface. All right. It looks like we're done with the section. And before we move on to the next topic, I would like to work on a small project that covers everything we just learned. Hopefully, this will make it easier for you to remember the commands when you need to use them in your own projects. That said, this video is completely optional. So if you're not interested, feel free to skip it. You'll find the project steps in the README. And if you're up for a challenge, pause the video, complete the project on your own first. And once you're done, come back and compare your results with mine. All right, so here's my solution. I'm going to navigate to the desktop and I want to create my project. So we go here with new folder and then we go with my branch project. Then we want to open up the folder in VS Code. Let's do that. We want to open up the terminal and we want to initialize the Git repo. Like this. Then we want to create main01txt. So we're in the main branch. Let's create main01txt, main01txt. To save it, we're going to create the commit message, main01txt. And we have our first commit. Then we're going to create two branches, feature and the bug fix. So let's do it. I'm going to do it with the help of GUI, create new branch, feature first. And then I also want to create the bug fix one, bug fix branch. Once we create the branches, we're going to switch over to the main and create one more commit since I want to make some changes in the main branch after I have created the feature and the bug fix. So let's switch over here. We want to go with the new file and we'll say main02txt. Main02txt. Okay, we're going to save this. We're going to create the message, create main02txt. Let's commit this. Let's switch over to the feature. And now we want to create feature one in the features folder. Let's switch here. We can see that we don't have the main two. That was expected. We only have main one since we created the branch when there was no main02txt. Now we want to create a folder. Features, for example, and then inside of the features, we want to go with feature01txt. What content we do want to add here, I don't know. Let's go with feature1txt. Why not? Let's save this, and now let's go with create feature01txt. Let me commit this. I'm going to switch over to the main since we want to check that the feature one is not in the main. So let's switch over to the main and notice we don't have the features folder and the file. So once we see that, let's now go to feature folder. Now we want to bring in the main. Again, if we're going to do this with the terminal, we'll have to provide the merge commit. If not, then the Visual Studio Code is going to do it for us. And therefore, I'm going to do it with the GUI. So I'm in the feature and I want to bring in the main. So we're going to go here with branch, then merge. And which branch we want to merge? Well, we're going to bring in the main. Now we're going to switch over to main and bring in the feature. So same deal. We go with branch merge and the feature one like this. Let me clear and let's see what is going to be our commit history. One line. And now we can see that we have create main one, create main two, then feature one, and then we have the merge commit. So that should do it for the feature one. And now let's work on the bug fix one where we're going to rebase. The steps are following. We want to create the file, the bug fix one, also the bug fix two. Then we're going to rebase. And then we're going to merge bug fix back into the main. And then we're going to work on deleting branches. So let's switch over to the bug fix one. Let's create those two commits. I guess we're going to do that in a folder called server. Let's go with bugfix01txt. Bugfix01txt. Okay. Going to save this, create bugfix01txt. Let's make the commit, and now let's repeat the same steps, only with a different file. So bugfix02txt. Bugfix02txt. And now let's set up the commit. Bugfix02txt. We have our commit. Now we're going to rebase on top of the main. And in order to do that, again, we want to go here. Then we're looking for branch. And instead of merge, we go with rebase branch. And which branch we want to rebase on top of? Well, that is going to be the main one. So we place our commits on top of the main one. And now we want to switch over to the main. So let's go to What am I doing here? We're going to go back to main, and then we're going to look for merge. Now we want to merge bug fix into the main one. With this in place, now let's practice on deleting branches. And I guess let's first delete the feature and the bug fix one. And then let's see how we're not going to be able to do it with the lowercase d if we haven't merged the branch. So in the terminal, I want to go with git branch and then lowercase d, which we can use if we have merged the branch. And I'm going to provide feature over here. So now we deleted the feature branch, and we can clearly see that if we go back to all of the branches. So there's only a bug fix one, and also we can do the same thing over here. Let's go to branch, and we want to go with delete branch. Now, which branch we want to delete? Since we are on the main, the only option we have is the bug fix one. And now let's create one more branch. I'm going to call this test branch. So let me go here with create new branch. We're looking for a test one. Let's make one file, test.txt. Test.txt. Then we're going to provide the same message here, test.txt. We're going to commit this, and now let's switch over to the main, and let's try to delete this branch with the lowercase. And remember, if we haven't merged the branch, we should get an error. So if I'm going to go with git branch -d and then test, we should get back the error. Now, we have two options. We can either merge it, or we can go with git branch D and then test. And with this in place, we're done with the challenge, and we can move on to the next section. And now let's take a break from the branches and discuss other useful Git topics. But don't worry, we will come back to branches when we discuss the merge conflicts. And the first topic in this section is going to be Git configuration file. Remember in the beginning of the course when we added username and email to the global config file? So Git can include that info in each commit. Well, there's also a local config file which allows us to customize things based on the project. This local config file is located in .git/config, and it can be used to set up project-specific settings like default branch names, merge strategies, and even custom aliases. In order to show you that, I will create another project. But before I do that, I do want to mention that don't feel bad if you keep working with Git and there's really no need for you to touch local. It really depends on your setup. There's instances where it's useful, but for the most part, using global one to set some values is okay. I'm going to navigate back to my desktop. I want to create a new folder. In this case, I'm going to go with 07. I'm going to call this config and also git ignore, since this is another topic we're going to cover, just so I don't have to keep creating projects to showcase something. So I'll combine these two. Let's open up the Visual Studio Code. Let's initialize the repository. Then I'm going to make one commit. Again, I'm going to go with my famous main. Let me zoom in more. So main 01 txt. Let's not add any text. It doesn't really matter. Let's go here, create main 01 txt. We make the commit, and for some reason I lost it. We make the commit, and then once we do, now we can open up the terminal. And as far as the location of the local config file, it's located in .git, then /config. And you can definitely navigate there and open it up in one of the editors like Nano or Vim. If you just want to see the values that you have in the local one, we need to go with this command. So let me close the sidebar, git config --local. As a side note, when we're working in a project, we technically don't need to use this --local. It will pick up by default the local one first and then the global. So that's why when we go with global, we definitely need to go with --global. But just to be clear which config I'm accessing, I will add this --local. And then we go with --list, and this is going to give us all of the values that we get here by default in our local config file. Again, if you want to see the location and if you want to open this up, let's go over here and let's type lsla. As a note, I think I've zoomed in too much, so let me zoom out a little bit. This is going to show me that I have .git and also the main one. So this is the hidden file. That's why we go here with LA. And then let's see what we've got over there. CD, git. And now let's go with lsla. And now we'll see the config file. So like I mentioned, you can use the Nano or you can use Vim and just go with config. And this is going to give you the values. And you can definitely edit here as well, or we can do it using the terminal. And in my case, I'm going to do it with the terminal. Let's exit Vim. So press on escape. Then we're looking for W and Q. And now we're out. And now let's just see how we can add, for example, different username in a local and how by default the local one is going to be used. Remember, in order to add the username, we need to go with this command, git config. In this case, we're going to go with local. And then we have a few options. We can go with add user, or we can directly set the user. First, I'll set the user directly, and then I'll show you kind of a gotcha we need to remember with add. So we're going to go here with user.name, and let's provide some kind of value. In my case, I'm going to go with shake and bake. Okay, good. We add the username. And let's also run that list command. So git config --local --list. And now we should see the username. So if I make another file, the main 02 txt, and we make the commit, create main 02 txt, and then run the git log txt. Let's commit this, and then let's close the sidebar, and we're going to go with git log, not one line, but actually the full log. you'll notice something interesting. So the initial commit was made by Coding Addict. And then since I changed it over here to shake and bake, what do you know? Now actually the username is shake and bake. And like I mentioned before, this is very useful if we want to change some values based on the project. So we have a global config, which we use for one set of projects. But if we want to change something, we can always go to the local config, change the values, and we're good to go. And one last thing that I would like to showcase regarding the config is the gotcha with the add flag. You see, we can also add the username or email or any kind of value using the add flag, and it looks like this. So we go here with git config, again, local or global, it doesn't matter. It's going to work the same way. Then we go with add, and then we decide which value we want to add. Now the gotcha is following if the value already exists, which is going to be our case, since we just added the username. Actually, it's not going to override it. It will add a new value. Now, if we don't use this add flag, it will override that. How is that going to look like? So if I'm going to go with username, and then I'm going to go to Bobby, for example. Let me add this one. Again, let me run the list one, just so we can see. And now we can clearly see that we have two values for the username. Now, in order to remove them, if you encounter such scenario, the command is following. We want to go with unset all flag. So git config, let me clear everything, git config, then hyphen local, then unset all. So hyphen unset all. As a side note, if you just want to unset one value, let's say if everything is correct, you have one username and you want to remove it, then you go with unset, not unset all, and then we provide which property we want to unset. And in my case, it's going to be the name. If we run right now the list one, we'll see that we have no username. So now let's try to make another commit. Let's go with main 03 txt. Let's commit this, create main 0 txt. And let's run the log one more time. Git log. And check it out. We're back to the Coding Addict. So if there is no value in the local one, it's going to pick up the global one. And also in this video, I would like to discuss a file called .gitignore, which is a special file in Git that specifies which files and directories should be ignored by Git. When we list files or patterns, as a side note, yes, we can also set up some patterns there. Git will not track the changes to those files, even if they exist in your working directory. And this is actually super useful for excluding temporary files, the build outputs. It's quite common, environment-specific configurations, and sensitive information from being committed to the repository. In my case, I'm just going to create .env file and store a secret there. And hopefully this is going to give you a good idea that whatever is in the .ignore file is going to be ignored by Git. And then whenever you start working on a production project, you can nicely navigate to git ignore and you can see which files are ignored in that particular project. So we're going to navigate back to our files. The file name is special. Yes, it needs to be dot. And then we go with git ignore. And again, whatever we place in this file is going to be ignored. And you can also set up some patterns. For example, you can say that the node modules, not only in this directory, but for example, in nested directories as well. In our case, we're just looking for .env, since that's the file I'm going to create. Let me create .env files. As I know, these are the environment variables that we set in node projects. And I'm going to call this secret.key. And then we go with my secret. Now, what's the reason to store them in the .env file? Well, because I don't want to push this up to a GitHub. Because normally when we work with projects, we do push it up to a GitHub. But I don't want to expose these secret values. Instead, I'll use them while I'm working locally. I'm going to set them up in a file, which is added to the gitignore. So this doesn't get pushed. And then once, for example, with the Node project, I go to deployment platform, yes, I will need to provide these values over there from the scratch. So I'll have them locally. I'll have them where I'm deploying the project, but I won't have them on the GitHub. So I'm not going to be sharing any sensitive information. And just to showcase that .env for sure is going to be ignored, I'm going to create one more 04 main one txt. And then if we navigate over here, notice how we're adding the main 04, we're adding the git ignore. So yes, we're committing the git ignore file, but whatever is specified inside of the git ignore is not added. So in my case, the .env, I'm not committing it over here. Let me go with create 04 and git ignore. Let me commit this. And if we navigate to all of the commits and take a look at the create 04 one, we'll see that we made only these two changes. So the actual .env doesn't show up there, which means that we haven't committed the .env with the contents to our commit. And as a result, we are keeping things secure. And also in the case of Node modules, we're not pushing too many files and folders up to a GitHub. And with this in place, we are ready to discuss git stash. Okay, and up next, let's take a look at the git stash command, which allows us to temporarily save our uncommitted changes and revert our working directory to the last commit. The commands we're going to cover in the following two videos are going to be git stash. So that's the command that will actually save the uncommitted changes. Then we also have git stash list. This is going to show us the list of items we have saved. If we want to take the item from the list, we're going to go with git stash pop, which is going to get the latest one. And also we have apply, which doesn't remove it from the list, but to tell you honestly, I'm going to stick with this one since that's the one that I use. Then we also have git stash push with the message, so we can add the message. And the last command we're going to cover also in the following two videos is going to be git stash pop. And then we can specify which item we want to take out of the list and apply to our project. We're going to start essentially with a happy path, where I'm just going to show you in the main how we would do that. And then I'll show you the actual use case, which is when we work with branches. I hope that by splitting this up in two videos, it's going to make more sense. In my case, I'm going to call this 08 stash. Yep, I'm going to open up another project. And a couple of things to keep in mind. Stash is only going to work if we have the commit. That's number one. And if we have tracked files. So if something is untracked, then we won't be able to stash it. Let's start over here by creating a main 01 txt. And let's imagine that for some reason I made these changes and I want to do something in a branch, but I don't want to lose them. So I want to keep these changes somewhere just so I can access them. But for the time being, I need this project back to the point where it was before I made these changes. Hopefully that is clear. So if we'll try to do the stash right now, it's going to say, hey, listen, you need to have one commit. That's the first gotcha I want you to remember. The stash is not going to work unless we have one commit. So let's go over here, create main 01 txt. 01 txt. Okay, we make this commit. Beautiful. Now we should be able to stash the changes, correct? Well, let's see. Now I'm going to create another one. So main 0 txt. Same scenario. For some reason, I decide that, hey, I want to keep these changes somewhere, but for the time being, I want to go back to the previous one, the main 01 txt. Again, we'll try it. And in this case, it's going to be a different error, which says no local changes to save. So in order to add something to the stash, it also needs to be tracked. Therefore, if I'm going to go to main 01 txt and add some changes, it's going to work. It's actually going to stash that, but it's not going to be the case with 02 txt. So let me showcase that by removing this text, then I'm going to create a new file here. Let's call this main03txt. Okay, I'm going to commit both of them. So I want Git to start tracking them. Create main2 and main3. Then we're going to commit it. And now we're going to go to main02. Let's add some text, whatever text you would like. And then we'll do the same thing over here. And now again, yes, I know it's quite annoying probably, but let's imagine that we want to save these changes somewhere. So we want to access them later, but not for time being. For time being, we want to go back to 02 and 03. And I promise you in the following video, I'll show you the actual use case, because at the moment you're probably looking at it and you're like, okay, I cannot imagine in a million years why I would need this. But this one actually is super useful. So we're going to go here and we're going to say git stash. And now it's going to add it to our list. So now if we go with git stash list, as a side note, if you're going to run the git stash list and you don't have any items, essentially it's going to return nothing. Unfortunately, I forgot to run that command in the beginning, but it is what it is. Once you have something in a stash list, then you'll see this stash. There's going to be a number, which by the way, we could use in order to access a specific item. It's a list, so this is the first item. Then we have some info, which branch it is. So in this case, it's going to be on main. And then we have the commit hash and commit message for that last commit. And as I said, this is something that we can change. Now, let me just add some changes in a project, just so it's more realistic. Let me go here with main04 txt, main04, okay. Let me add this commit, just so you can see that it works even after we add some changes to our current repository. Create main04. Let me commit this. And now if I want to bring back those changes for 02 and 03, I simply go with git stash and then pop. So this is going to get the most recent item that was added to the list. So we're going to go here and notice it right away says, hey, this is what you modified. And if you want, now we can actually commit this one. Now, what other options we have with git stash? Well, for one, we can provide our own commit message. So we go here with git stash, then push, then message. And in my case, I'm just going to go testing git stash, just so it's clear that I'm definitely referencing this stash item. And now if we run the git stash and then list, now I'll see that we have our item. Also the message matches to whatever we just typed. And now let's apply this change. So I'm going to go here with git stash and then pop. So this is again going to apply the changes that we stashed. And if we go with git stash and then list, like I mentioned, we won't have any items in the list. And also I want to showcase how we can get the specific item from the list. And in order to showcase that, I think I'm going to stash this one more time. So let's go with git stash. I'm not going to provide the commit message. We have git stash and then list. So now we have, again, item back on the list. And now let's go to one of the tracked files, whether that's 01 or 04, for example. As a side note, yeah, you can even add in these two as well. But just to make it less confusing, let's change it over here to some text from git stash. Okay, let me save it. We have some changes, and now let me again add it to the list. In this case, I will use that message just so we can see. Git push m, and the message is going to be following latest stash item. Okay, awesome. Then we go back to git stash list, and we can see that we have two items. So this one was added as the last one, and then we also have the previous stash. And as you can imagine, now I can pick from these two. So if I'm going to go simply with pop, it's going to get the latest. But what if I want only this one? Well, then we need to go here, git stash. Again, you can use the apply, but I prefer actually pop. I prefer taking it out of the list. And right after the pop, we want to go with stash, then add, and now we want to point to the item we want to grab. And in my case, I'm going to go with number 1. So once I do that, notice now I'm getting back the changes that I applied to 0, 2, and 0, 3. And one last thing, if you want to take all of the items from the list, you can just keep on typing git stash and then pop. So one by one, you'll get all of the changes. So notice I run this command, and now I added all of the changes that I have saved. So now finally I can navigate here, and let me just say make changes. Not the most useful commit message, but hey, it is what it is. So make some changes, and now I finally commit all of the things that I was storing locally. And with this in place, we can move on to the next video, where I'm going to show you a good use case for git stash, and that is when we work with branches. All right, and once we're familiar with git stash, let's see a practical example. I'm going to continue working in this project. We have 4 files, we have some changes, and now I want to create a new branch. In my case, I'm going to call this feature. I think I'm going to start with a happy path first, and then I'm going to show you some gotchas that I think you should be aware of. We go to feature, and the first thing we'll need to do is actually make a commit. So let's set it up. New folder, same deal, feature. We start here with feature number 1. For now, let's not add any text. Let's just commit this. Let's say, okay, we want to go with create feature 01, like this. We're going to make the commit. Then we're going to add some text over here. Random text in feature 01. Beautiful. And now let's imagine a scenario that we want to go to the main one and check something out. We want to maybe compare something. And this is a realistic scenario. When you're working on the production project, you have your branch and you quickly want to check something, whether that is in your teammates branch or maybe it's in the main. And if we'll try to do that, notice something interesting. And in this case, I'm going to go with git checkout the command, but the same scenario is going to be if we're going to use the GUI. So if we go here with git checkout main, if we have already a tracked file, and if we made some changes and we haven't made the commit, we're going to get this helpful error message where Git basically is trying to help us. It's going to say, hey, listen, you need to either commit these changes or stash them before you switch the branches. And now we know how we can use the JStash. So we can go here nicely with git stash, and we're going to stash this change. Then we're going to switch the branch. So we're going to go here with git checkout and main. We navigate over here. I mean, if you want, you can make the commit in order to save the time. I'm not going to do that, just to showcase that it's going to work regardless. Then we're going to go back to the feature one. And once we're back in this branch, remember we have our stash list. And once we run the command, notice this should look familiar. Again, we have the list of items, and this is the last one. We have the branch. In this case, the value is feature, since we added the stash on a feature branch. And then again, we have this last commit. So let me grab this item from the list and apply those changes. And then I'll cover some gotchas that we need to be aware of when we work with branches. So in this case, let me go with git stash and then pop. I will commit this over here. Let's say create some text. Why not? Okay, let's commit this. And the first gotcha I want to showcase is following. If we haven't made any commits in the branch, actually the changes we applied are going to continue following us. What am I talking about? Well, let's switch back to main. Let's create a new branch, and I'm going to call this bug fix. So in this case, I'm not going to make my first commit. I'll simply create the folder bug fix. And then inside of this folder, we're going to go with new file, bugfix01.txt. We don't need to add any text. I just want to showcase that if we're going to switch back to main or feature or whatever, this commit is going to continue following us. So even if we remove this bug fix, this untracked change is still going to be here. So either then we remove the file or we decide where we want to add that commit. Again, it's not going to be the case if we already made that commit in the branch, just like we saw with feature. But it will be the case if there are no commits in this particular branch. Again, I can even switch to a feature over here. And basically now I'm going to add this commit to the feature one. That's the first gotcha you need to be aware of. The second gotcha is following. If we go right now to the bug fix, then commit this change, create bug fix 01, apply it. Then let's add some changes over here and let's create another file. So here's some text. And if I'm going to make a file that again is untracked, basically I haven't committed this one, for example, bug fix number 2 txt. What's going to be interesting that once I run the git stash over here, it's going to stash the tracked one. Notice how the text is gone, and technically this one is in a list, git stash list. Check it out. We have it over here. However, this one is not. So as we're going to be switching between the branches, again, this is going to continue following us. Some minor things which you might not encounter, but I just thought that it's important for you to know these gotchas. And with this in place, we can move on to the next topic, which is going to be head and the detached head. And up next, let's discuss head, detached head, and git reflog command. And just to reiterate, the head in Git is a special pointer that represents your current position in the repository's history. It typically points to the tip of the current branch you're working on, indicating which commit you're currently viewing or working with. So if we have such a scenario where there's a main branch with the M1 and M2 and the bug fix one with B1 and B2, in the main branch, the head is going to point to M2, and in the bug fix one, it's going to point to the B2. Once we merge them, then both of them are going to point to the same commit until we have some changes again in the branch. Just to see that in action one more time, let's create over here a new folder. Let me check as far as the numbers. I believe it's already 9, because this stash one I should have saved. I'll get it in between the videos out of the trash. Let's go over here with 09 and let's just call this head. Even though in this video, again, we're going to cover quite a few things. So you know what? Sorry, my bad. Let's also write here reflog. Since we're going to cover this command as well, I'm going to open up my Visual Studio Code, set it up. Let's create the repo. I will create 3 commits in the main, simply because we'll need that for the detached head. So let's try it out. New file. We're going to go with main 01 txt. Same deal. 01. And let's make those commits. Create main 01 txt. And one by one, let's repeat that. So we'll have 3 commits. And by the way, we can right away see where the head is. If we just go over here with git and log, and then 1 line. And since we have only 1 commit, this is where the head is pointing in the main branch. Let's continue. We're going to create another one. Let's go with main 02 txt. Main 02 txt, or just simply main. That part is irrelevant. Create main 02 txt. Yep, we're going to save that, and it's not going to be the surprise that once I run here, now I have 2 commits. And again, the head is pointing to this one since this is the latest commit. And then let's create one more commit over here. New file. Let's go with main 03txt, main 03txt. And we're going to commit that. Create main 03txt. We have 3 commits. Now let's switch to a feature branch. So let's create the branch. I'm going to call this feature, I guess, in this case, not a bug fix. We switch over here. We make a few commits. Let's try it out. I'm going to go with the, you know what, let's just keep the folder one. So feature, inside of the feature, we have feature, I guess, 01txt. Let's add some text here as well. Then we're going to commit that feature or create feature 01txt. And then let's do it with one more commit. So in here, let's create feature 02txt. In this case, let's maybe skip the text. Doesn't really matter. Create feature 02txt. We're going to save it, and if we run over here, git log one line. So again, let me go back to previous command. Now I'll see that in the feature one, it points to the latest commit. And then if we'll switch to the main, we'll see that it still points to the latest commit in main. So at this point, the starting position was the same for the feature and main. So at that point, they were pointing to the same commit. But once we actually create some commits in the feature, now in the feature is going to point to the latest commit. And if we switch over to the main, run same command, you'll see that in here, it still points to the latest commit. So this is totally up to you if you want, or you know what? Yeah, actually, let's create that commit so we can have the merge commit, just so you don't think that I'm messing with you. So I'm going to go over here with some new commit, new file, in this case, main 04txt. I'm not going to add a text. There's no need, I guess. Main 04txt. Let's commit this. And now I want to merge the main into the feature. So I'm going to switch over to the feature one, and I'm going to merge the main one into it. So we're going to go with branch, merge, and we're looking for the main one. Once we do that, we're going to have a merge commit. And if right now we're going to take a look at the log one line, let's see what we've got. So one line, remember we are in the feature one. Now the head one points to the merge commit. And now once we merge back into the main, both of them are going to point to the same commit. So this is how the head position is changing. Let's switch over. We're going to go with main in this case. Again, we repeat the same steps. Look for branch, look for merge. In this case, though, I'm looking for the feature one. And once we run it over here, the same command, the git log one line, now both of them point to the same merge commit. So hopefully this is clear. Essentially, head just represents the current position, and it typically points to the tip of the current branch you are working on. And once we're clear on the head, let's discuss the detached head. And detached head occurs when head points directly to a commit instead of the branch. And remember, in our case, we got to the detached head state when we checked out into a specific commit. And the problem with that is that if we make some changes and we make the commits, if we are in a detached head state, these commits can be lost if we switch the branches. So long story short, I'm going to show you how we can get to the detached head. And I'm also going to show you what is the solution so we can access those commits if we make any, of course. For now, let me just close everything over here. And this is totally up to you. But since I have quite a few commits in the main one, I think I'm just going to pick one of them over here. So let's say I want to go back to this main 0 txt. First of all, let me take a look. We can go over here, so I can find the commit, and I can actually go with the right click, and notice I can go with checkout and then detached. So this is going to navigate to the specific commit. I'll go back in time, and I'll only have the changes that are associated with that specific commit. But the problem is going to be that I'm not associated with any branch. And you can definitely use this option. I will still stick with the commands just to make sure that we remember them. So let's go over here with git, then checkout, and now we want to grab the commit. Notice over here, we have the commit hash. Let's navigate over here. We will have the warning that we're in detached head state. Also in the GUI, everything is yellow over here. It's also screaming at us. And everything is awesome. I can navigate around the project, but the problem is going to be that if I make any changes, they're not associated with any branch. And in Git, if we want to save those commits and access them later, we do need to associate the commits with the specific branch. So what is the solution in this case? Well, we actually have two options. First one, if we are in this detached head state, and let's say I want to create a bug fix one over here, bug fix 01 txt. And before we make any commits, what we need to do is to create a branch, which essentially is going to take all of this info, all of our commits, the previous one and the current one over here, and then we'll be able to nicely save them. And the idea is the same as we would be creating such branch from the main one. The only difference, well, now we're creating from the specific commit. So they're even suggesting the same command over here. In their case, they go with switch, but I'm going to go with the checkout one. As a side note, you can do it over here as well. You can go with the create branch. It's definitely an option. Let me clear everything for now. Then we're going to go with git checkout B. We're going to come up with a name. In my case, I'm going to go with bug fix, I guess. And what is going to happen, we'll grab all of this info, move it to the branch, and then we'll be able nicely to make the commit and access it later. And check it out. Now we're in a branch. Now we can make the commit over here. Let's say create bug fix 01 txt. Let's commit this. And now we can nicely access everything because the commit is associated with the branch. So I have 3 branches. Let's say I made this change and now I can decide what I want to do. Do I want to implement this change in one of the branches? Do I want to just test something? I mean, this is totally up to you. The point is that now I can nicely access that commit because if I'm in this branch and if I go with that one line one, I can nicely see that I have the commit in place. So this is one option. If you're already in the detached head state, just create the branch out of that state and you'll be good to go. Another option is simply not to get to the detached head state. Now, what am I talking about? Well, let's switch back to the main one. And let's take a look. Which commit can we use for this one? Maybe let's go with create 03. Remember, we can create branches directly from the commits. So once I'm in the main, I'm going to go with git log -- one line. I mean, probably should have used the previous command, but it is what it is. Then I'm going to look for my commit, which is this one over here. And now we want to go with git checkout, then B. So we right away create that branch and let's use the commit. So in this case, we're skipping that whole song and dance where we navigate to the detached head and then we create the branch out of that state. In this case, we create the branch from that specific commit and we can nicely save the commit. Now, one thing you probably noticed is the fact that the name is not very user-friendly. So essentially, I use the hash. And in order to avoid that, we can provide the name for the branch. For starters, I would like to navigate back to the main. So let's switch back to the main. Let's clear everything. And once we have the clear terminal, now I just want to remove the specific branch I just created. How do I do that? Well, we're going to go with git branch. This is going to list all of the branches. Then we're going to add the command to remove the branch. And I'm going to go with capital D, since we haven't merged it yet, like this. And once we have cleared the branch, now let me create one more time the branch from the specific commit. Only in this case, I do want to provide the name for the branch as well, just so I'm not using the commit hash. Let me clear one more time, git log, one line. Okay, we get this one over here. And now let's type git checkout B. Then let's call this payment, for example. And we want to grab the commit. Again, this is totally up to you which commit you want to grab. In my case, I'm going to go with this one. So we switch to the payment, and we have the 3 files we have, which are associated with this commit. And now we can make the changes, and everything is going to be correct. The commits are going to be associated with the payment branch. So when it comes to detached head, we have 2 options how we can deal with that. Either we create a new branch once we are already in the detached head state, or we don't even get there. We just simply create the branch out of the commit hash. And the last thing that I would like to show you in this video is git reflog command, which shows all of the changes made to the head pointer. So unlike the git log one, which shows the commit history of the current branch, the reflog one actually shows all of the changes made to the head pointer, including commits, checkouts, and merges. And it's particularly useful when we accidentally have deleted the branch or commit, or when we just want to find the commit hash of a previous state. And you'll definitely see that in action in the following video when we're going to cover git reset. But the reason why I added the topic in this video is simply because we made quite a few changes in our repository. So there's quite a few records of our head pointer, and I didn't want to recreate everything from the scratch. So it doesn't really matter which branch we're in, but just to be consistent, I'm going to go back to the main one. And now if I'm going to type git reflog like this, and once we do that, we'll see the reference log, where we'll see all of the changes made to the head pointer, whether that is checking out to a different branch, making the commit, making the merge commit, and rest of the stuff. And again, this is super useful when we want to find the specific commit, which you'll see in action in the following video. In order to exit, again, we just press Q and we're good to go. And up next, let's discuss git reset command, which is a powerful command that allows you to undo changes in your Git repository. It can be used to unstage the files, discard changes, or even remove commits from your commit history. With that said, we will only cover the most common use cases with git reset here, since I don't want to overwhelm you with too much information and too many options that most likely you won't use. So in here, I kind of provided the options that I use. We'll start with git reset and then soft. And yes, I will discuss what this head 1, 2, and 3 and all that means. Then we also have git reset hard, and obviously you'll see the difference. We can also reset our repository to a specific commit, and we can also unstage the changes. And yes, during the video, we will use the git reflog command, which we covered in a previous one, since now you'll see it in action. I will create a new one just to stay on the safe side and start from a clean slate, so it's not too overwhelming. I believe I go with 10 over here. Let's call this reset or git reset. Git reset. We're going to make 3 commits, and then we're going to start practicing with the reset one. Let me open this up, set it up. Yep. We want to initialize the repo, and we want to create 3 commits. So 3 files. And one by one. That's kind of important. I'm not going to make any content over here. So for now, let's just go with main 01 txt. Let's commit this and let's keep on moving. Main 02 txt. Commit message. And then one more. Main 03 txt. And let's go with create main 03 txt. And just like I have in the README, we're going to start with the soft flag, which undoes the commit, but it still keeps the changes staged. Now, what am I talking about? Well, if we run over here, git log one line, we'll see our 3 commits, correct? And when it comes to git reset, we can set our repository back to a specific commit by referencing head 1, which is going to be the latest commit, then head 2, which is going to be one before that, and hopefully you see where I'm going with this. And since in our case we have 3 commits, as we're going to be resetting our history, these are our options. So head 1 is always going to point to the latest commit, and then head 2, one before that, and then if let's say we have 10 of them, this is how you're going to reference them. Hopefully that is clear. Now, the difference between the reset hard and reset soft is following. With the soft one, we still keep in the staging area. However, with the hard one, we essentially remove that commit and all of the changes are gone as well. To showcase that in action, we're going to go here with git reset, then -- soft. And for now, let's just go with the latest commit over here. So we're going to go with head and tilde here, and we go with 1. And what you'll notice is something interesting. So we have the main 1 and main 2, but this one hasn't been committed. So this one is still in the staging area. Now, if I go with head and then 2, yes, you understood this correctly. Now we'll have 2 files over here. So if I'm going to go back and commit this one, for example, create 03, let me just keep it short. Then again, we go with git log one line. We have 3 commits. And if we're going to go with git reset and head 2, now we'll have both of these files in the staging area. Just to showcase that, let me move up over here. Let me go with head 2 like this. And now we have 2 files that we need to stage. And now I'm going to go with create 02 and 03. Let's commit this and let's run the log one right now. Let me clear everything and let me log one line. And as you can see, now we have only 2 commits. So we had 3 commits. We used git reset soft, which essentially took all of the changes that we had in those commits, put them in the staging area. And at that point, we can decide. In my case, I made another commit, but obviously you can change some stuff. You can remove some stuff. This is totally up to you. And then I made another commit. And as a result, I have only 2 commits right now. Now, when it comes to the git reset hard, the difference is that we're not putting anything anymore in the staging one. We essentially set our repository to that specific commit, not in the detached head state, but actually back to that specific commit. So in my case, I think I'm going to create one more just so it's more interesting. So I'm going to create one file. I'm going to go with 04 txt. Beautiful. As far as the changes, you know what? It's just a bad habit. I want to write something in a file. For some reason, saving the file without providing some info just feels wrong. Not sure why. We're going to go with create main 04 txt. Okay. Awesome. We're going to make this commit. We're going to go with our log. And now let's try it out, the git reset hard. In here, we have a few options. We can either go back to the specific commit, or again, we can use that head 1, 2, 3, and whatever commits you have. In our case, we have only 3. And that's why we'll only have 3 options. if let's say you're going to try with git reset, then hard, and you're going to go with the number that doesn't actually represent the number of commits. For example, let's go with 5. See, Git is complaining, unknown version. So you won't be able to do that. Hopefully that is clear. Now let me again go back to one line. Okay, and now let's go back to this commit. So let's wipe out the latest commit over here. And let's see the gotcha and why reflog is so useful. We're going to go with git reset, then hyphen hard. So in this case, we're not keeping anything in a staging area. And let's just wipe out the latest commit. So we're going to go with head and then 1. Okay, everything is good. If we take a look at the files, we only have 3. So the 4th one is gone. But the gotcha is following. If you're going to run git log one line, you'll notice something interesting. The commit we wiped out doesn't exist in my git log right now. So the problem is, if I decide that actually I want that commit, technically it's gone. Now you can say, well, you have it here on the top. Yeah, that's true. So if you still have the terminal history where you can see the commit hash, you're still good to go. But a lot of cases, you'll do something like this. Clear. Okay, what about now? How are we going to get that specific commit hash? And I'll show you that in a second. And I already provided a bunch of the clues in the previous video and in this one as well. For now, let's just see how we can do the git reset hard with the commit hash, and then we'll find the previous hash. So what am I talking about? Again, let's go with the git log one line. Now I have 2 commit messages. One is going to be for create main 1, and the second one is for the 2 and 3. And if we want to set our branch to the specific commit, for example, in my case, I want to go back to this one over here. We also have this option, git reset hyphen hard. And then instead of the head and the number, we actually can go with the commit hash. So I can take this hash, and now I'm going to set my branch back to this specific commit. So now I'll wipe all of the commits that were made after, like this. We go over here. We can nicely see that we only have 1 file, but if we run the git log, we'll have the same problem right now. So if I want to go back to the state where I had the main 4, well, there's going to be an issue. I need to have that hash, but I don't see it when I go with git log one line. I can only see the commit and all of the commits that were made before. In our case, we didn't have any commits. That's why we only have 1. So how we can find those commits that were made after this particular commit? Again, if we have the history in a terminal, we can definitely nicely use that. But if it's not the case, if we run the clear, then we need to run git reflog, which is going to show us the movements of our head pointer. And in here, we can nicely see we created 1, 2, 3. Then we moved the head. Then we created 3. Then we reset the last 2 commits. Then we created 0, 2, and 0, 3. And then we created the main 4. So I can nicely grab this commit hash here. Then the same command, we want to go with git hard. And we just provide over here the hash one like this. And now we're back to the previous state. And now it's going to unstage these changes over here. And the last thing that I would like to show you in this video is how we can use git reset to unstage the changes. What am I talking about? Well, I'm going to go first to main 04txt, and I'm going to add some random text over here and also create a new file. I'm going to go here with main 04 or 05. Let's do it correctly. txt, also random text. And if we add them to the staging area like this, again, you can run the command or you can do it in the GUI. If for some reason you decide that, hey, listen, I don't want to have all of these changes over here. I still want to work on them. I don't want to stage them. You can nicely go with git reset, and then it's going to move it back to the working directory. So it's going to essentially unstage them. Okay, and while we're still on the topic, let's see one more way how we can undo the staged changes, how we can revert the unstaged changes, and also how we can clean up the untracked files. For that, I'm going to change some text in the main.05.txt. So this is going to represent the tracked file. Let me go back to maybe main.05.txt. Good. Let's save this and let's create one more file, and I'm going to call this main.06.txt. And just like I covered in the previous video, if we have both of these staged, in order to move them to the unstaged state, we can go git reset, and then we can add the dot, or we can just go without it, and it's going to unstage all of the files. Or you can name the specific one. And we also have an option to go with git restore -- staged. And again, we can go with dot for all of the files, or we can go with the file name. So the alternative is following, a little bit more typing, I guess. Git restore -- staged. And you can definitely test it out with a single file. I'm going to go with all of them and notice how now they're moved back to the unstaged state like this. Now, if we want to remove the files from the unstaged first, I'm not sure why I moved them back to staged. Let me just try out the git reset and then dot. Notice how again I'm going to move them to unstaged. If we want to remove them from the unstaged, basically if we want to go back to the previous commit, we can type git checkout, again, either the file name or dot, like this. So now it's going to remove the changes in the main.05.txt. It's not going to touch main.06 since this is untracked, but as far as the 05, notice how it went back to the random text. So this is one option. Let me just change this around. Again, I'm going to add some changes here. 05.txt. Let me save this. Let me keep it here. I'm not going to stage it. And now let's see another option, which is going to be git restore. Again, file name if you want, or you can go with the dot. And when it comes to untracked files, we want to go with git clean, and then we need to provide a few flags. For starters, if we just want to see which files are going to be removed, we're going to go with -d and then n. -d is for the directories, and then n is going to perform the dry run. Essentially, it's going to tell you what we're going to be removing. And then if you want to remove actually the files, you can go to git clean -d and -f, which is going to force the removal. And now we actually remove main.06.txt. And as always, we can also manually remove the file, the untracked one as well. And with this in place, we are ready to move on to the next topic. All right. It looks like we're done with the section. And before we move on to the next topic, I would like to work on a small project that covers everything we just learned. Hopefully, this will make it easier for you to remember the commands when you need to use them in your own projects. That said, this video is completely optional, so if you're not interested, feel free to skip it. You'll find the project steps in the Readme, and if you're up for a challenge, pause the video, complete the project on your own first, and once you're done, come back and compare your results with mine. All right, so here's my solution. I'm going to navigate to desktop. We want to start by creating my Git folder, or whichever name you prefer. I think I'm going to go with my Git. Then same deal, we want to open our text editor. We want to open up our terminal, and we want to initialize the repository. So those steps are the same. Now we just want to change the name and email in our local config. And in order to do that, we're going to go with git config, then --local, and then remember it was user name. And yeah, I'm not going to be original. I'm just going to go with shake and bake. Let's do this. And then we were going to repeat that for the email. So I'm going to change the value over here. And I'm going to go with shake and bake. Maybe let's go with lowercase. So let me rewrite this from the scratch. So shake and bake at gmail.com, for example. Okay, we add this. In order to test it, we need to go with git config, then --local, and I believe it was --list. Yep, I can see that I have name and email, and also we'll be able to verify this once we make some commits. So we want to create 3 commits, main1, main2, and main3. In all of them, we'll add some info, and we're going to commit them one by one, just so it's more interesting, since we're going to go back to specific commits during this video as well. So main 01 txt, let's save this. Let's go with create main 01 txt, and we want to repeat pretty much the same thing for all of them. So this will be a new file, 02 txt, main 02 txt. Let's commit this main 02 txt. And then the last one is going to be the 03. Okay, we have all of them, I believe. So what is the next step? We want to create a git ignore file, and we want to ignore all markdown files that start with temp. And then we want to create temp1 and temp99, and we want to provide some content, and we want to see whether they will actually be ignored. So let's go here with new file, then git ignore. Remember, this was a special name. And then in order to ignore all of the temp files, not just one. So yeah, you can write over here temp markdown. But if we want to ignore all of them that start here with temp, we just add a star over here. And this is where you'll have to essentially get creative. And the more projects you'll work on, the more approaches you'll see, and then you'll be able to use them. If you want to ignore the node modules in the README, you'll find the code. There's other setups we can use. For example, for this one, we just add a star, which essentially means that all of the files that start with temp are going to be ignored. And in order to showcase that, I'm going to go with temp, and then let's say 01, markdown, some content. Let me save it, and you'll actually see that we have only git ignored staged. So the temp one is not present. And the same is going to be if I go with temp 99, for example, markdown, some more content. Still, I only have that git ignore. Let me just set up the message, create git ignore. We're going to make the commit. And I believe up next, we're going to start working with the stash. The way we're going to do that, we're going to go back to main 01, more content here. Let's say that we don't want to actually commit this. So if we take a look, we can see that we made some changes over here, and I don't want to apply them right now, but I also don't want to lose them. Also, we want to add a message to our stash, and therefore we need to go with git stash, then push message, and I'm going to say testing stash, like this. So let's stash our changes. As you can see, now the changes are gone. And if we go with git stash list, now we can see what stashes are available to us. And in order to apply the stash, remember we go with git stash pop, which is going to get the latest. or we can get the specific one. And if you're looking for a specific one, again, please reference the README. In my case, I'm just going to grab this one, git stash pop. It's going to apply the changes that we created here. And I'm going to go with modify main01 txt like this. We're going to make the commit. And now let's work on the detached head. So I'm going to clear everything. We're going to pick one of the commits. So let's go with git log and then one line like this. And now let's navigate back to, for example, this particular commit. So we go here with git checkout, and then let's copy the hash, for example, like this. So we navigate here. We know that we're in the detached head state. Essentially, we don't have the branch. And now let's see what we can do over here. What's interesting, since we don't have the git ignore, it actually pulled the files, the temp1 and temp99. So I'm just going to discard them in this case. It's not relevant to what we're doing. And let's just navigate to, let's say, main 3, and then let's add some content. Now we're going to make the commit, modify main03 txt. We're going to make the commit. But remember, in order to access this commit, we actually need to be in the branch. So at this point, we need to create the branch out of this particular commit. The way we do that, we have multiple options. Let's go here. Let's go with create new branch. And I'm going to call this best one. Why not? So we navigate over here, and now we actually have this modify main03 txt. So if we ever want to access it, we just go to this particular branch and we will be able to do it. Okay, let me clear everything right now. Let me maybe switch back to main. Why not? And now let's run the reflog command just to see the movements of the head. So let's go with git reflog. And now we can nicely see all of the things that we did in this particular Git repository. Then we're going to make 2 more commits in the main01. So let's go with more text. Or you know what? No, let's do hello world. Now we're going to modify main01 txt. Okay, and then let's add hello people. And we'll do the same thing over here. We're going to go with modify main01 txt. We're going to save this one right now. Let's make the commit. And now let's use the soft reset to undo the latest commit. We'll go with git reset, then soft. And if I want to put these changes in the staging area, we're going to go with head, then tilde, and 1. So now this hello people is going to be in the staging area. And again, we can provide the commit message. Now I'm going to provide the same one, modify main01 txt. Let's make the commit. And let's also see how we can reset the last 2 commits. So we're going to go with soft, and then let's go with tilde 2. So now both of these changes are in the staging area. So we can go with modify main01 txt, and we're going to commit this. All right, and once we're done with the soft reset, now let's practice on the hard reset. I have 2 of these commits. Pretty much the commit message is the same. So why don't we practice on moving 2 commits back one by one. I'm going to go with git reset, then hard, and then let's go with head 1. Okay. Now we have only one, modify main1. And actually, if we take a look at I believe the file name was main. Now we have only here the more content. And then if I'm going to do this one more time, then obviously I'm not going to have the extra text at all. Then we want to add some changes, stage them and unstage them. And then we'll take a look how we can discard the changes. And after that, let's work on the temp file. This is what I see as far as the steps. So in here, I'm going to, again, add some stuff main, or you know what, let's do more text here. And let's copy and paste. Let's save it here. I'm going to add it to the staging area. And remember, in order to remove it from the staging area, my preference is git reset and then dot. So now this is going to be unstaged. Again, I'm going to add more text here. Let's say a few more lines. And now if I want to discard these changes altogether, since this is one of the tracked files already, I can go with git checkout and then dot. So now all of the changes are going to be gone. And now let's practice with the untracked file. So if I create over here temp txt, the moment it's not tracked, some text, for example. And if I want to remove it, I have a few options. I can either delete the file, or if I want to do it with the help of Git, we have git clean and then df. So these are the two flags we need to provide. And if everything is correct, we have successfully removed the temp file as well. That should do it for the preview content. If you enjoyed it and want to keep going, the full course is available on codingaddict.io and also on Udemy. Just search for my courses and you'll be able to enroll in this one and many others.